The King in Yellow. The King in Yellow. Is fiction. Apparently not. I don't think I was hallucinating, or being tricked. All the tricks were out in the open, that's how they worked so well. I know what I saw, what I spoke with. And it wasn't as if it was just him on his own, there was plenty of corroborating evidence. Like I said, there was a whole family of them. A castle. His kingdom. You can't know this thing must have been, it's not possible that. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy, I said gently, to help Evelyn as she struggled to complete her sentences. Evelyn did not thank me for that. She gave up her protests and glared across the kitchen table, unimpressed and heavy-lidded, looking like a dark cloud incapable of bursting into rain. Heather, she said. That is the third time you've quoted that exact same line of Hamlet at me since we first met, and it makes no more sense now than the previous 2 times. Delighted surprise stole over me. You remember when I quote things? Evie. Evelyn waved me away with a huff, squeezing her eyes shut and pinching the bridge of her nose. This is giving me a gaping arsehole of a headache. You are giving me a headache. The King in Sodding Yellow is giving me a headache. Drink, Preem intoned from next to Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn hissed through her teeth and continued to ignore the stone-cold mug of tea at her elbow along with the merely lukewarm second mug, the barely hot third one, and the plate of now soggy toast that Preem had attempted to get her to eat during the hour I'd taken to tell the story, to no avail. Evelyn had been too focused on me, watching and listening and taking notes, with all the rapt attention of seeker after knowledge trying to piece together a shredded text from some ancient library. Except, from her reaction, one had to assume the venerable tome had turned out to be full of childish insults and drawings of genitalia. Preem's got a point there, Evie, Rain said. She was looking far more at ease, feet up on the corner of the table, ankles only, soles dangling over the edge after being told off by Preem with her chair rocked back to balance on 2 legs, hands behind her head like she was sunbathing at the beach. Unlike Evelyn, Rain had not only downed a cup of tea, she'd asked for a mug of my coffee too, and eaten some vague approximation of breakfast, though I disagreed in the strongest terms that microwaved pastries from the freezer counted as breakfast food. She wiggled her bee-socked toes in the air, cracking small joints with satisfying audible pop sounds. You're dehydrated. I don't need water, Evelyn grumbled. I need half a bottle of whiskey. Sod that, I need a shot of morphine. She glared at me again, her elbows on the table, hunched with the exhaustion of an unresolved all-nighter. You're serious? You met and talked with the King in Yellow, or at least something calling itself that. Like you're talking to me? Not in hyperdimensional mathematics. Everything you've just said, it didn't happen in some abstract mind space. I shrugged. It was very physical. I don't know what more to tell you, Evie, I can't seem to make you believe. Why does it matter? Because. Evelyn snapped and threw her hands up. It's fiction. Gurg. 7 Shades of Sunlight let out a low, throaty rasp, showing a quick snatch of her sharp little needle teeth. She was perched in a chair pulled so close that it was touching mine, staring across the tabletop at Evelyn's denial. Evelyn almost managed to control her flinch this time. She'd improved over this last hour, every time 7 Shades had something to add, but she hadn't quite mastered herself yet. She huffed and shot a redoubled glare at Sevens. Yes. You have something to add? He'd like that, Sevens gurgled. She only managed to hold Evelyn's gaze for a moment, then looked down and away, rocking slightly in her weird squatting pose. Like what? Evelyn snapped. Mages convincing themselves he isn't real. Grrr, Sevens laughed like a malfunctioning radiator, but without much of a smile. Greatest trick the devil ever pulled, Preem intoned. Hey, that's what I was about to say, Rain said. Great minds think alike, Preem. Great minds, said Preem. Evelyn didn't look away from Sevens, daring her to resume eye contact, but the hunched gremlin at my side declined the challenge. Instead, Seven stared at her own pale little hand, moving it slowly back and forth over the table, in and out of the watery, early morning sunlight pouring in through the kitchen window. She'd been doing that on and off since the dawn had broken through the clouds. True sunlight revealed the fine tracery of blue veins beneath the mushroom-pale skin of 7 shades of shivering sprite. I ran a tentacle up her arm, gentle and supporting, following her back and forth motions. "Evie," I said, gently as I could, and that proved more difficult than I'd expected. I had to consciously restrain myself from reaching across the table with a spare tentacle to wrap around her forearm. I already had another tentacle coiled in Rain's lap like a cat, but Evelyn didn't like being touched without warning normally, let alone by invisible feelers that she could only see through a pair of glasses that made her eyes hurt. But I didn't want her to dislike Sevens. She grunted, still staring at Sevens. "Evie," I tried again, "why does it bother you so much?" Evelyn let out a huge sigh and sat back in her chair, one hand massaging her thigh where flesh met prosthetic socket, the other finally giving in and picking up the stone-cold cup of tea. She took a sip and pulled a face. "Still hot." Preem indicated the most recent cup of tea with a brush of her fingertips. "Yes, thank you Preem, you're a dear," Evelyn muttered, swapping mugs and sighing after a sip of tea how tea should always be. "She's salty because she's been proved wrong," Rain said with a wink. "And she hasn't got a theory to replace it yet. Give her 5 minutes, she'll make one, and it'll be better than the last. Theory for everything, our Evie." "This bothers me," Evelyn used her words like a whip, eyes shooting daggers at Rain and receiving a mock duck-and-cover gesture in surrender, "because I once spent a significant amount of time reading them all: Chambers, Blackwood, Lovecraft, Ashton Smith, Dunsany, even Robert Howard Haw. What a different world we'd be living in if he was right. I even tried some of the modern ones: Derleth, Campbell, all that nonsense. Because I needed to know what was real and what was fiction. Because she shot a look at Sevens, then shrugged when the yellow daughter didn't even look up. Because my mother insisted it was important. Because she made me read them." "Oh," I said. "You've never told me that," Rain added, eyebrows raised in surprise. "There's plenty of things I don't tell you," Evelyn grumbled. "But," I said, "wouldn't this mean your mother was wrong? She was wrong about plenty of other things, isn't this another chance to stick it to her?" I did little air quotes with one hand. Evelyn shook her head. "She would be delighted. Oh. She always insisted there were grains of truth in some of all that pulp fiction guff." Evelyn tapped her fingernails on the table in an irritated rhythm. "Didn't know what though, or where, or who. She would love this. The discovery, the confirmation, being proved correct. Same as me, same as." "She is dead," Preem said, voice like a musical bell made of ice. Rain's eyebrows shot up her forehead and she looked to me for emergency help. I shrugged minutely, fully prepared to get up and walk around the table to give Evelyn a hug. Evelyn grit her teeth at the interruption and started to bite back, to hurt, to lash out. "She's deedy dead diddly dead deado," Preem said, utterly expressionless. Evelyn stopped like she'd walked into a lamppost. I wrapped an invisible tentacle around my own face to stifle a laugh. Rain stayed perfectly still, like a cat spotting a dog. 7 shades of one of us watched the exchange with her black eyes flicking back and forth, like the audience at a tennis match. Then Evelyn sighed. Something slipped inside her, some gear that she wasn't capable of shifting on her own, some long-tensed muscle she'd been desperately trying to unlearn how to flex. She glanced at Preem, then raised her eyes to the ceiling. "That she is." "Deddy doodle," Preem added. "Okay, yes, you can stop now," Evelyn sighed. A nasty smile slowly crossed her face. "And she never got to find out. Good enough for me." She shrugged and took another long sip from her cup of tea before banging it down on the table, then spoke with only a thin veneer of sarcasm. "Fine, Heather. The king in yellow is real, and strong, and he's your friend. Now, I need some bloody breakfast before I start digesting my own bones. She pulled a face at the soggy, cold toast on the plate at her elbow. Bacon and eggs, Preem intoned. Please. I'd spent the last hour or so telling my friends everything, from the top, while the sun rose on a chill and grey Sherrowford morning. After I'd dropped the bomb about Seven's half-intentional marriage proposal, Rain had suggested we decamp to the kitchen. Just like that. I'd been shaking with nerves at the reveal, ready for anything shouting, anger, another round of Rain's unfairly suppressed jealousy, perhaps even another Jutter stop as she failed to integrate what I'd done. But Evelyn was far worse than Rain, looking at me just so utterly exhausted by all this, as if she should have expected nothing less. Rain barely reacted to the actual news, which spooked me badly. Working out everything with Zheng had been painful enough, so I was prepared for this to send an emotional wrecking ball at the reinforced concrete of our relationship. Perhaps the walls would hold, or perhaps they would buckle and we would have to dig through the wreckage for bits of rebar to build a temporary shelter. Perhaps doing this a second time would be the last straw on the camel's back. Never mind that I had agreed to nothing with Sevens, committed to nothing, said yes to nothing. I had blurted out as much. It's only out of respect for her. I haven't said I will, we haven't started anything. I haven't kissed her, I don't even know if I want to. But Rain just laughed. She shrugged, aimed a pair of finger guns at Sevens, and said something about being a spawn camper. That went completely over my head, but it provoked Evelyn to hiss with disgust and throw a balled-up piece of paper at Rain's head. Rain, don't you want to shouldn't we I mean, this, I'd stammered and stuttered. "Sh. Come on, you need to sit down." Rain had taken my hands and coaxed me along, smiled at me without guile, and helped me make the walk into the kitchen though 7 shades of sunlight stayed glued to my side, hiding her face and unable to glance up at Rain. I felt like I was held between a pair of animals which might snap at each other any moment. I'd half-dragged myself to a chair with my tentacles, legs still wobbly from the strange outside high. Sevens had huddled next to me, quivering like a leaf, breath hissing between her teeth in little gaspy spurts. Rain crouched so she was eye level with me in the chair, held my hands, and didn't even comment on the tentacle I instinctively wrapped around her shoulders, though I saw the moment of surprise in her eyes. "You've just been through a traumatic experience," she said, beaming softly with that bottomless confidence which still made me melt in her hands. "And hey, I get it, you wanna unload it all at once. And I wanna hear all about it too. But right now the important thing is that you're home. Chill, right? You wanna get out of that hoodie? It's covered in blood. Better get it in the wash if we've got any hope of saving it. That's all your blood, or?" "Oh, all mine, yes." "Rain, I take it you wanna keep the yellow robes on for now though, yeah? You gotta get some food in you, at least. And I can run a bath if you like." The others trailed into the kitchen after us, Evelyn all but stomping, Preem gliding over to the counter with Evelyn's cooling cup of tea. The knight had to duck to pass through the kitchen doorway. Preem shot him a silent look and he unshouldered his axe. 1 second later he would have put an impressive hole in the wall. This building was not made for beings of his size, at least not without Zheng's muscular grace to compensate. Was it my imagination, or were his movements growing less coordinated? I'd struggled to pull my thoughts together, still deep in the sensory high from my return, but trying to stay prepared for Rain's true reaction. I'd never had to pretend to be sober before. "Don't we need to talk about all this?" Rain had shrugged though she'd glanced at Sevens. "What's to talk about? Don't give me that." I'd hissed. "You can't just glide over this, you." "I can and I will," she shot back suddenly, sharp enough to make me flinch. She squeezed my hands tighter, as if afraid I might pull away from her. "Heather, my priority, my number one, my reason for being awake all night long, my reason for breathing, is you. And right now you're kinda loopy." "So are you," I'd murmured. "Obviously exhausted, and crusted with blood. You want me to be me? Well, here you go, this is me. My number one priority is you being safe and healthy, and until I'm satisfied about that I couldn't give a flying shit for your need to explain. I blinked at her, half surprised, half cheering that she was finally denying me something. Oh okay. Then she cracked a grin and everything was okay again. Or has the king planted a bomb on you that goes off if you don't start necking with sevens ASAP? What are we at, T-20 seconds until you gotta shove your tongue down her throat? Grr, Sevens gurgled against my side, trying to curl up small enough so the floor could swallow her. WWL no. But I. Oh for pity's sake, Evelyn hissed from the other side of the table. Heather, Rain said, warm and patient, but utterly immovable. She would not take no for an answer, not about this. You wanted me to be real and raw, so you've got me raw. Now do as I say. A deep blush rose up my neck and cheeks. Yes. Yes what? Rain asked. I blinked at her, totally lost. Yes, ma'am, she filled in for me. Rain. I hissed, shooting a deeply embarrassed glance at Evelyn and Preem. Evelyn looked like every word of this was killing more of her brain cells. Rain, you stop competing, you don't need to win anything, I thought, but I couldn't say that out loud. I appreciate the thought, but you're avoiding the subject, just like before, and... Yes, ma'am, Rain repeated. Say it. Ugh, Evelyn grunted. I rolled my eyes. Yes ma'am. Good girl, Rain purred. But I need to know how you feel, I blurted out. Now that was the truth, maybe too raw. Rain winced in slow motion. Yeah, so do I, might take a while. My heart climbed into my throat. I couldn't believe my luck, an honest admission of hesitancy and irresolution, from Rain. The sky was falling. Rain. Rain, what does that mean? I dunno yet. She shrugged and glanced at Sevens again, still huddled against my side. I'll tell you what it doesn't mean though. Doesn't mean I disapprove of yellow here. But it doesn't mean I like this. She took a handful of the yellow robes, the symbolic commitment, the warmth of Seven's embrace still wrapped deep and soft around my shoulders. Gotta think about that one. After all, I've got dibs on you. Before I could react to any of that, Rain let go of my hands and straightened up. She reached past me, going for Sevens. For a second my heart slammed against the cage of my ribs, expecting the worst, but Rain brushed the top of Sevens' head and gave that lank, greasy hair the ruffling of a lifetime. Sevens yelped into my shoulder with surprise, a strangled, gnashing sound. Rain managed a full second of ruffle before Sevens exploded upward from my shoulder and bared all her teeth, hissing and gurgling like a cross between a surprised possum and a rabid squirrel. Snap snap went her teeth, clacking shut on empty air as Rain whipped her hand away just in time. You're a good girl, too, Rain said, laughing. Sevens' ire vanished, replaced with an incandescent blush. I think I like you now, Yellow, said Rain. Any friend of Heather's is a friend of mine. We cool. Yellow? Or you want me to call you something else? Seven stared at her like a deer in headlights, black eyes gone wide, then rammed her face back into my side so hard it knocked the wind out of me with a little goof. I wrapped an arm around her head, driven by a bizarre need to comfort her. Rain laughed and ruffled my hair too, then grabbed another chair and slid it up behind Sevens until it gently touched the backs of her legs. Sevens jerked and flinched and let out a gurg. Rain, be gentle with her, please, I said. Please don't do what you did with Zheng, this is different. Rain actually blinked at me in surprise. I'm giving her a chair. For real. Hey, Yellow, come on, you gotta sit too, if you're gonna be here for real and not float off. Those legs aren't powered by magic, far as I can see. Sevens accepted the chair by climbing into it, gurgling and rasping like a stray cat warily accepting a bowl of food. She still refused to let go of my side, clinging on with both hands. Her sitting position looked horribly uncomfortable. She squatted on the chair, feet planted firmly, knees up, shoulders rounded. A natural position for one blessed with double joints and hypermobility, perhaps. She was like rubber. Evelyn finally sat down opposite us, eye bags heavier than her gaze. "Stop flirting." "Why?" Rain asked. "I'm enjoying myself here. Because I am not getting up to relocate again." She made sure to catch my eye. "Heather, either go take a bath or start talking. Or eating." I really don't think I could begin to relax," I said. "I'm sorry, Rain, I can't, I need to unburden." Rain shrugged with her hands. "How about a compromise? You eat some food, drink some fluids, take it easy, and I'll listen." "Cool." "Cool," I echoed. "You're also covered in your own blood, so you are coming out of that hoodie," she added. "You wearing anything under there?" "The usual, 2 t-shirts." I lifted a corner of the yellow robes. "But, Allow me," said Rain. I didn't have much of a choice, I couldn't have resisted even if I'd wanted to. Rain rolled the yellow robes down my shoulders until I could wriggle my arms out of the sleeves, then peeled me out of my terribly blood-stained hoodie. She passed it off to Preem, who stepped into the utility room, presumably to shove the garment into a bucket full of cold water. Before I could do it myself, Rain helped pull the yellow robes back up to cover my shoulders again. "Are you sure?" I asked. Rain nodded. "Sevens," rasped Sevens. "Oh, wonderful, now she's like a Pokemon," Evelyn sighed. "Sevens, then." "Got it," Rain said without missing a beat, and I realized Sevens had been peeking at her over my shoulder, showing twin slivers of red pupil. "You want a bath too? Not to critique your personal hygiene, but you look like you need it. You could even share it with Heather." "I'm cool with that." "Rain." I squeaked at her. "Later," Sevens rasped. So I told them everything, in as much detail as I could recall. I told them about getting stuck on the quiet plane, rubber-banded back by the immovable object of the dead hands, waiting for me in the membrane between worlds like a tripwire snaring my ankles. The dregs of my strange high finally dribbled away as I recalled the fear and panic, the blossoming of childhood terror into awful reality. That 9-year-old Heather was still huddled up warm and safe in my core, still tender and afraid, as if the rest of me was a protective shell I'd woven around her. She stirred at the memories and I felt tears threaten behind my eyes, but I wrapped metaphorical arms around my previous self and reminded her that we were strong enough to survive anything. I told Evelyn and Rain about how I'd gotten the bright idea to find Saldies, and how I'd taken the night with me, how he'd volunteered to help me in my hour of need. Rain saluted him for that, with a clenched fist held pointed at the side of her own head. To our surprise, the knight returned the gesture of respect, though somewhat slower. His elbow creaked ever so slightly. I recounted the dimensional slingshot technique and passing out on the floor when I landed in the library of Carcosa. I told them about finding Saldies, about the confrontation with Hastur. Evelyn scoffed again. But she also asked me to pause and repeat that part. A spark kindled behind her eyes. She asked Preem if you would be a dear, please, to fetch her notebook and the pale tome, the one on the left, from the magical workshop. She had me repeat every detail of Hastur's appearance, everything I could remember. Her questions grew more esoteric, more difficult to answer. What kind of taste in the air? Were the tentacles repeating any patterns in their movements? Did it whisper, any sounds, any words at all? Until I could answer no more. As I spoke, Rain began to ply me with food. Preem had moved to start cooking first, brewing another cup of tea for Evelyn and putting coffee on for me, but Rain had silently taken over the responsibility of making sure I ate. She put food in front of me without a word, then leveled meaningful looks at me until I paused to take a bite. She led with 2 slabs of thickly buttered toast, then moved to jam, then a bowl of oats and honey, then on to Pop-Tarts. It rather extended the process of telling the story, but after the first few uncertain bites of toast and jam I felt my body start to wake up, demanding fuel for the fires of mortal life as my physiology switched from outsider processes to human metabolism. My abdominal bioreactor had been running so hot and high for so long that I didn't have to exert any conscious effort to begin sliding the biochemical control rods back into their channels. As glucose hit my bloodstream, the inexhaustible thrum of extrabiological power ebbed away, slowing to a trickle, just enough to maintain my 6 tentacles. A new kind of exhaustion settled on me as the miracle in my abdomen powered down to a resting state, eyelids like lead, a dull headache, limbs heavy with the wrought iron of overexertion. Even my tentacles felt sluggish. I wrapped 2 around my own body and 1 around Seven's shoulders. I'd bought time and endurance with the bioreactor, but all debts came due in time. Rain noticed my struggle when she made me a plate of scrambled eggs. The smell was intoxicating. It brought me back to my body, to my needs, to being alive and fleshy and incredibly hungry, but I didn't reject it this time. I had my tentacles now and they gave me something to cling to, proof of what I really was. I could have eaten 3 times what Rain made, but when I fumbled my fork and dropped it on the tabletop, she insisted on wiping my face with cold water. I felt like a small child with grubby cheeks as she washed away the lingering traces of my own blood. When it came time to recount what had happened in the corridor of living darkness, I left out the details, not only Seven's private matters, but Evelyn's too. I glossed over what nobody needed to hear. Sevens herself relaxed as I told the story, as I contextualized her princess mask. She finally stopped gripping my robes and peeled her face away from my side, hooking her small, pale hands around her ankles as she squatted, peering at the others across the tabletop. She gazed at Preem with interest, sometimes made furtive eye contact with Evelyn, and snuck little sideways looks at Rain. Apparently she didn't need to flex her knees to relieve joint pressure in that pose. I was almost jealous. But now she chooses to appear like this. Evelyn gestured at her with a pencil, but spoke to me. Why? She's not even yellow anymore. Authenticity, Sevens gurgled in the back of her throat. Well, I'm getting to that, I said. It's complicated. And I might not even get to it. It is Seven's business, really. You said it yourself, Heather, Evelyn reminded me. She's all masks. How can she have business that isn't imitation? I am right here, you know, Sevens rasped, but she looked down at the tabletop when Evelyn paid attention to her. Yes, Evelyn sighed. That much is undeniable. Is she going to be living here? Heather, even this house only has so many bedrooms. I think so. I don't know. I assume so. You need to eat, too, Sevens. Rain asked, swanning past the table with a second cup of coffee for me. She placed it down with a tiny flourish of presentation. Not hungry, Sevens gurgled. Nah, I mean, do you need to eat, for real? Rain asked. Judging by those teeth, you need a carnivore diet, yeah. Hey, you wouldn't be the first in this household. We've got a packet of bacon in the fridge. Evelyn rolled her eyes and tapped her pencil against her notebook, impatient for me to continue. Of course she doesn't need to eat our food, Rain. She's not even really physical. She's not technically real. Hey, we can afford an extra mouth. Evelyn turned an expression on Rain which would not have been out of place on a stone carving of Satan glowering down from a doomed mountaintop. If she'd looked at me like that I would have hidden under the table, tentacles or no. If the king in yellow had really wanted to make me leave without taking Sevens, he should have imitated Evelyn at her most deeply insulted. You mean I can afford an extra mouth, Evelyn said, voice dripping toxic waste. And don't ever suggest I would not be willing to do so. Whoa, Rain put her hands up, laughing. Okay, we're cool. Don't bite my head off. No money jokes, Preem intoned. Rain turned the surrender to her too. Not a carnivore, Sevens rasped between her pointy sharp needle teeth. She managed to glance up at Rain long enough to make a flicker of eye contact. Eat, yeah. Should eat. Anything else would be cheating. Sure then. Eggs? Egg, said Sevens. Rain shot her a wink and a finger gun. Sevens' red-on black eyes followed Rain around the kitchen as she cracked 3 more eggs into the pan and scrambled them up. When the food was ready, Sevens ate with rapid nibbles, taking tiny bites and chewing them with the speed of a rodent. Evelyn continued to take notes on everything I said about what lay beyond the library of Carcosa, the king's hollow sphere world of castle, the landscape of pale mist, the creatures and strange beings within. She asked me endless questions about melancholy and the big angry trapezoid, and when I couldn't answer, she turned to 7 shades of sunlight. What are any of you actually constructed of? Evelyn demanded. You're not normal matter. But Sevens merely shrugged. You know, she said with the sulky disinterest of a teenage girl at a parent-teacher meeting. What are you made of? Mostly carbon and water, Evelyn shot back. Don't you even know that? Sevens blinked those huge black eyes. She managed to stay fixed on Evelyn for a second and then twitched her head to look at me. Need to go down to understand. Down in the dark. Like Heather. She knows. Evelyn huffed and gestured with her pencil. All right, fine, whatever. Heather, carry on, please. In the end I couldn't hold back the waterworks when I spoke about Alexander Lilburn. I told Rain and Evelyn and Preem about the King in Yellow, about his family, about the meeting he had lured me into, the meeting that imitated the same fateful time I'd met the real Alexander in a shuttered and closed Sherrowford coffee shop. What a bastard, Rain muttered. No. No, he knew what I needed, I said. But, also yes, absolute bastard. Rain whistled. Evelyn frowned through the whole thing with professional interest, rapt with attention, sharing a confused look with Rain when I explained the respective transformations of the king's favorite steel and orbit. Rain sat forward in her chair and held tight to one of my hand when she began to realize what had really happened out there. What I'd really seen. And it was all right, I repeated, wiping slow tears on the sleeve of my yellow robes. It was all right. That's what he showed me. When I killed Alexander, when I murdered him, it was the right thing to do. Not because of some set of ethics that justifies it, but because it needed to happen. And the hands, they didn't have any power over me anymore. And then I went home. Came home. And here I am. A moment of silence settled over the kitchen, broken only by my sniffling as I brought my tears under control, for there was nothing to cry about anymore. Sevens gurgled softly. Rain squeezed my hand. Then Evelyn sighed. Heather. I looked up at her, surprised by the ease in her eyes. You're not the only one who's had to deal with this. Killing a mage, when it had to happen, but never feeling right afterward. She cleared her throat, but it didn't help, her words still came out stilted and halting. If you need to talk about, well, you know. You could have done, with me. You still can, whenever. I know what it feels like. To my surprise, one of Preem's perfectly neat hands crept onto Evelyn's shoulder and stayed there, even when Evelyn awkwardly tried to shrug her off. After a moment, Evelyn cleared her throat and patted Preem's hand in return, awkward and tentative. I nodded. Thank you, Evie. I thought I was okay with it. With what I did. I guess I wasn't, but I didn't even know. You know it, but you don't know you know it, Rain murmured softly, then to my surprise she sighed too. She leaned over from her chair and helped dry my eyes with a gentle thumb brushed across my cheeks. Because it needed to happen, yeah. Yes. Rain. I blinked at her, at the new way she was looking at me, serious and a touch sad, but then she broke into a smile. I guess I hoped you'd never have to learn that. I laughed, once, more bitter than I'd expected. Learn that murder is sometimes okay? She shrugged. But hey, you were never going to stay innocent, and that's okay too. Innocent, really? I almost bristled. Rain, I was never innocent. Rain laughed and put her hands up in surrender. She was doing that a lot this morning. Poor choice of words, right? Hey, I just hoped I could shoulder some of that for you. You can't shoulder murder for other people, I said. Bloody right, said Evelyn. She tried to do the same thing for me too, you know. She ever told you that? Although she was much more clumsy about it back then. Screamed it in my face with my mother's corpse not even cold. Literally. Rain stared at Evelyn in blank-faced surprise. Holy shit, Evie. What? Evelyn hissed. What? I'm not allowed to finally deal with that via a bit of humor. Rain laughed, shaking her head, but I could see the delight in her smile even as she verbally brushed it off. Come on, Evie. I hit your mum at least 6 different ways that would have killed a regular person. I did that murder too. Evelyn pursed her lips. You keep telling yourself that. Tally, -1, Preem intoned. Rain gaped at her in mock offense. I actually laughed. Seven's eyes ping-ponged back and forth between my friends as they bantered about matricide. I squeezed her arm with a tentacle and she let out a low, raspy, "Gugurk." Heather, Evelyn said, her tone sliding down into the chill waters of something I did not like, her pencil resting against her notebook. You need to explain that last part to me over again. In detail, please. Because I still don't understand the king in yellow. The real thing. The sun finished rising as I repeated details for Evelyn. Sevens kept sticking her pale hand into the patch of light on the table. And I did too, letting the warmth of our own star soak into the dry and dirty skin on the back of my hand. As Rain stood up and rubbed my shoulders through the yellow robes to work the tight knots out of my muscles, I stared through the small kitchen window at the scraps of blue beyond the clouds. Sevens watched and listened and learned, not as an observer who had convinced herself she was objective, but as a participant, in the room, here with us. Preem and the night had nothing to say, but I liked that both of them were here with us. Part of me wanted to step outdoors to bask in the sun, despite my aching muscles and heavy limbs. Here was where I was meant to be. A sensation grew inside my chest, a dull realization that I would have felt that way even if I'd slipped back to the wrong location, say, if I'd landed in the Gobi Desert or the Australian outback or the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Well, yes, I would have been in a panic. I'm still me, but this specific relief, this return of the real, that would have remained even with all else gone. But I didn't like that thought. I didn't need the world, I just needed what was in this kitchen. And upstairs. And sleeping off a rough night outside. And over in Brinkwood. And wherever Zhang had got to. Earth for Earth's sake mattered nothing. I'd killed Alexander for the safety and lives of specific people. After we decompressed, when Evelyn finally accepted the existence of the king in yellow, and when Preem had speed-cooked bacon and eggs and firmly rejected Rain's help with a silent stare, Evelyn still regarded me with that cold clinical look, a mage's look, those narrowed eyes and that probing intelligence, staring at me over a half-cleaned plate in our very normal kitchen of slate floor and old countertops and cast-iron stove. Evie. I ventured, sending my own probe back to discover her intent. Do you even begin to understand what it is you've done, Heather? She asked. Evie. I'm serious. You're also being creepy as hell, Rain said. What I've done? Made a new friend? I glanced at Sevens, who was peering right back at Evelyn across the table, eyes shaded by the tilt of her own brow. Outwitted a monarch? Okay, I didn't do that part. I'm pretty sure he could have stopped me if he'd tried. Evie, what are you talking about? Evelyn sucked on her teeth, turning her head as if to examine me from different angles. Her eyes roved my sides and my shoulders, even though she couldn't see my tentacles, not without the aid of her hastily wrought trick glasses, which currently sat on the table in front of Rain. Her gaze made me want to slip the squid skull mask back on over my head, but I'd left it in the magical workshop. This was home, this was safe, I didn't need the mask. Did I? Evie, hey. Rain clicked her fingers twice. I know what you're doing. Evelyn ignored her, eyes cold with hunger. Heather, the experience you had this night, 19 hours outside, alone and far from human contact, that is the sort of thing which forms the basis for an entire tome like this. She tapped the book on the kitchen table, the one Preem had fetched, bound in worryingly pale leather, old and cracked but still supple. Any mage achieving such a feat and surviving it would be ambitious beyond telling. But you've been outside too. We all have. To the library of Carcosa, together. She gestured at Sevens, but didn't look away from me, and then I saw the hint of wonder in the back of her eyes, the spark of awe touching kindling I dare not examine too closely. Instead, I stamped on it. Evie. Evie, I know that look from you. Don't. Oh don't, she started. Don't look at me like I'm a mage. I'm Heather. That's all I'll ever be. Don't. Yes. Evelyn cleared her throat. Yes. Sorry. Still. She brushed it off, barked with laughter and let herself grow sardonic. My mother would have given her firstborn for such an experience. That's me, in case you don't get the joke. No, Preem intoned. Evelyn cleared her throat again and looked away. Evie, where is this coming from? I demanded. Evelyn shrugged. Old habit. Survival strategy. I said sorry, didn't I? You were gone all night, Heather. Forgive me for thinking the worst. I didn't like the tone in her voice, but she had a point. It does feel like I was gone a lot longer than that, I said, haltingly. Could that have actually happened? Rain perked up. You don't look older or anything. Tired as shit, sure, but not older. I'd know. I couldn't help but smile despite myself. Thank you, but that's not what I mean. Time dilation? Evelyn asked. That's why you were panicked when you returned? I shrugged. I slept twice. The second time, I know how long that one was, because Sevens and Saldies were both right there. But the first, I was just unconscious on the library floor, wrapped up in a cocoon of my own tentacles. I looked over my shoulder at the forest knight, standing tall by the door to the workshop, axe held point down on the kitchen tiles. The knight was there, but I'm not certain he experiences time like we do. I could have been lying there for a subjective week. Weren't, rasped Sevens. We all glanced at her and she moved to hide behind my shoulder, but managed to refrain from the full withdrawal. Just hours. Hours. Okay, I sighed. Okay, good. Thank you. You went on a true journey outside, Evelyn said. You returned with artifacts, with gifts torn from the utmost rim of the universe. She gestured at my yellow robes and through the door behind me, at my squid skull mask sitting on the table in the workshop, staring at us with 6 dark eye holes. Saldy's golden pendant lay there too, dull in the shadows. You met a god, but you didn't even think to ask the relevant questions. Any mage would give both eyes to hear the merest whispers from an outsider of that scale, but you. Evie, don't, please. Yeah, hey, Rain added. Evelyn, down. Evelyn shook her head, sighed and smiled, hard and savage, right at me, a choke in her voice. Heather, your every action proves me wrong. Proves my mother wrong, I suppose. I love you too, you godly fool. I was too stunned to thank her. Evelyn held her resolution for about half a second before she blushed, looking down and tapping her notebook with her pencil. We all knew better than to comment on the sheen of tears in her eyes. Love is good, Preem intoned. Yeah. Rain joined in. Hear, hear. Bit generic, but big truth from our resident maid enthusiast. Preem gave her a look. Rain shrugged with a very "I did my best" kind of expression. I don't think she understood what was going on with Evelyn. In truth, neither did I, not fully. Evelyn rolled her eyes at all this, a nice opening for an elegant recovery as she scrubbed her face on the back of her sleeve. We all pretended not to see. She pointed her pencil at Sevens. And I don't suppose I'm going to get anything out of you, am I? This time, Sevens met her look, staring sullen from behind black jewels. What's to get? Exactly. You're a theater kid, not a monarch. You have nothing to teach me. Evelyn paused with a strange look on her face, a wary intensity, a paradoxical need. Do you? Sevens tilted her head to the side, so slowly that my imagination supplied the creaking of a door from some half-remembered black and white horror film, something about ancient castles and forgotten caskets. Her head rotated on a neck far too rubbery and flexible to be truly human, though I heard the popping of several vertebrae as they stood out on the back of her neck. Her black and red eyes never left Evelyn, glittering like rubies in the night. She stopped blinking. Stopped breathing. Stopped moving at all. That was no act. The motion was distressingly predatory, like something Zheng might do, but purer, more real. Zheng's body had, after all, begun life as a human being. Seven's motion reached down into my brainstem and tugged at ancient instincts evolved for avoiding big cats on the African savanna. This scrawny, pale, weird little creature squatting next to me was a predator. My genes knew so. Evelyn flinched back, following her instincts too. Rain sat up straight all of a sudden, eyes fixed on Sevens. Preem didn't move. She knew better. She saw through the mask, but her milk-white eyes swiveled to fix on Sevens. But to me, in that moment, this mask of 7 shades of sunlight was heart-achingly cute. Before I knew what I was doing, I reached out with one hand and touched the back of Seven's neck, entangling my fingers with her long, dirty hair, cupping the base of her head where spine met skull. Vulnerable, slender, full of fragile little bones and important blood vessels and vital nerve trunks. Her ever so slightly too warm skin tingled beneath my fingers as a shiver shot through her. I was entranced by this mask, by the predator, by the paradoxical seduction. And unlike Zheng, she wasn't even trying. RR. She flinched, breaking eye contact with Evelyn and jerking round to face me, but a pair of my tentacles had instinctively lashed hard around her slender wrists, holding her tight as our eyes met. A soft hiss rose up my throat, the first time I'd felt the urge to hiss at anything other than a threat. It came out low and slow. It felt right. We stayed like that for 3 heartbeats, heat climbing up my face. But I couldn't let go. Be nice to Evie, okay? I squeezed out eventually. Sevens nodded. Jerky, up and down, once. I let her go as suddenly as I'd grabbed her. 7 shades of suitably submissive rocked back, but didn't flee. She ducked her head and watched me as I withdrew hand and tentacle alike. I felt a laugh creep up my throat with strange and hysterical delight, buzzing inside with something I'd never felt before. When I glanced around the table, I found that Rain was watching us with deep interest and curiosity, which only made me choke on my laughter. What I meant, Evelyn raised her voice to stop us descending into complete animalistic nonsense, is that you have no magic to teach me, Sevens. Nothing about outside. No secrets. Yes. Gurg, went Sevens, like a white noise machine set on a note too deep. She eyed me warily once more, then bumped me with her head, exactly like a cat accepting a petting. But she quickly returned her attention to Evelyn. Nah. Oh, I realized with numb fascination, I was establishing dominance. Evelyn blew out a long breath, still a little jumpy, watching Sevens like the stray she was. I don't know how you find her so palatable like this, Heather. I preferred the prissy princess. Right, yes. I mean, she's fine. I was still recovering from what I'd done. I murmured, almost out of breath with strange excitement. I don't prefer the princess. Oh wow. Yeah, me neither, said Rain, loud and proud and swinging her feet down to the floor. She stood up, twisting her head left and right and flexing her back to work the sleep deprivation kinks out of her muscles. Then she went quite still and locked eyes with Sevens. But I sure would love to have a chat with her. Don't know if I can say the things I need to say to that sweet little face. Sevens held her gaze but also dug a hand into my robes, holding on tight. Flushed with the aftereffects of how I'd just renegotiated the nature of my relationship with 7 Shades of Gnashing Goblin, my mouth ran away before I could control myself. Rain, I mean you, I hissed through my teeth, trying to get a grip. Rain, you can be as jealous as you need to. We'll deal with that. You can accept it or reject it and I am 100% by your side and we will work this out. Rain shot me a grin, her confidence dialed down just a notch less than usual. I already said, I don't really know. I mean, I don't even know who or what I'm actually dealing with here. This isn't her, not really, is it? This is just a mood. You and I, she said to Sevens, pointing 2 fingers at her own eyes and then back at Sevens, we need to get to know each other. For real. You can do that, I blurted out, then looked at Sevens. You can do that? Arg. Sevens ducked her head, avoiding the attention. The princess, well, Rain said with a shrug, half-acting, putting on a show. I don't like the idea of her bending you over and making you squeal. I went tomato red, mouth wide open in a splutter. Sevens did her weird gurgle laugh in the back of her throat. Rain shot a pair of finger guns at her. See what I mean? Gobo gets it. I'm not a gobo. That's disrespectful, Sevens rasped. Sure, said Rain. So, is there a real you I can speak to? Abyssal, Sevens said. Wouldn't recommend it. Ah. Right. Beyond even me, hey. But you ain't beyond me, not like that. I knew exactly what she was doing, she was trying to communicate. But I couldn't help myself. I do not squeal. I said. Sometimes you do, Evelyn drawled, looking like she wanted to pass out. I can hear it through the walls. Everybody looked at her. Even Preem. I was joking, Evelyn added. Rain was laughing, I was blushing, and Sevens seemed to be relaxing into this somehow. So yeah, the princess, maybe yes, maybe not, Rain went on. But hey, Goblin Girl here is the same thing, the same person. I accept that. So I don't know how to feel. She shrugged. You've really not even made out with her? I sighed and rolled my eyes, trying to control my blush. Not everything is about physical lust, Rain. Emotions are real too. Why does it matter if we haven't? I'd never intentionally break your trust like that. She shrugged. Yeah, but what if you want to snog her? Then I'll have to. To not do it, my mind supplied. I glanced at Sevens. Could I reject her for Rain's sake? She stared back at me, red on black like fire inside obsidian, sulky but apparently not worried. Maybe she couldn't understand what was being negotiated here. Or maybe I was the one not seeing the truth. Call it my simian territoriality or whatever, Rain said. My alpha prerogative or something. Oh please, Evelyn drawled. Heather's the only alpha here. Rain cleared her throat. Well, yeah, but you get the point. Anyway. Heather, there's a bit of me that doesn't want you to do it unless I give you permission first. Permission? I asked, feeling a much slower yet much hotter blush creeping up my cheeks. Yeah, Rain said. She waited a beat, watching me with a growing smirk, a nasty one, showing a few teeth. Ask permission to kiss Sevens. Sevens and I glanced at each other at the exact same moment. The scrawny little gremlin had points of bright color growing in her cheeks too. You want me to? I asked Rain. Rain took 3 steps closer to my chair. I suddenly felt like she was towering over me. Ask permission. Go on. She placed a hand on my shoulder and bent down, so her face was inches from mine. I could not have stopped her with 24 tentacles. I was like a rat in front of a snake. Let's find out what I say. I opened my mouth, but my tongue was dry as sand. My heart felt like a dying dove. My hands were shaking. Next to me, Sevens was making a gurgle in her throat, but my hindbrain registered it as submission. Rain was indeed much more powerful than the Yellow Princess. Rain laughed and let go of me and took a step back. She shot me a wink and ran a hand through her hair and tilted her chin up, beaming with confidence. And it was all real. I let out a sound like a confused seal. Right, Evelyn hissed. Before you lot inevitably make a gigantic mess in the bathroom that I don't want to know about, I have to ask. 7 shades of sunlight, what are you right now? Sevens turned with a little flick of her head, desperate for relief from the pressure of Rain's attention. Excuse me? What? I'm not a fool, Evelyn explained. What are you? Clearly not a human being. This mask, I mean. What was it before you borrowed it? Vampire, said Sevens. Evelyn frowned and sighed like a small child had just said something very stupid. There's no such thing as vampires. And to my surprise, to everyone's surprise, judging by the flinches and the stares, Sevens pulled a huge, toothy grin. It had none of Zheng's slow predatory menace. It was like looking at some fairy creature that had just stolen a cooling pie off a windowsill and been caught with crumbs on her fingers. Evelyn cleared her throat and looked away. Rain nodded in appreciation. Sevens let out a RRR laugh, like a small electric motor with a loose blade. I stared at Sevens, and realized. Oh no, oh dear. I sort of did want to kiss her. Well, Rain said, raising her voice over my kindling desire, maybe it's time for that bath. I sighed and nodded yes, shaking a little at all this, but feeling the exhaustion drag at my limbs. I suppose so. Oh, I do wish Lozzie would come home already. I am still worried about her. Sleeping off a night out, Preem intoned. You're probably right, I admitted, but I wish she'd do that at home. I wish she would. Creak. A noise like a submarine at sea rang through the kitchen, of creaking plates and straining rivets, metal tortured by the pressure of the deep. For a split second I thought it was the house itself, that something had come loose in some distant room, a beam was buckling or a bed breaking upstairs. The sound was so clearly structural, on a greater-than-human scale, something going very wrong. Crack-clunk. Behind me, the knight dropped his axe to the floor with an almighty clang. I wrenched round in my chair, tentacles grabbing the table for leverage. Rain and Evelyn were both staring, as surprised as I was. Sevens all but fell out of her chair in shock, half sprawling on the floor in a tangle of pale limbs and long dark hair. Preem picked up a tea towel and stepped forward. The forest knight was bleeding. Thin watery red liquid was seeping from the almost imperceptible seams in his shining metal armor. Every plate and piece of his suit was quivering, as if he was struggling to keep his hold on the inside, like a man in the grip of a hemorrhagic fever. Lozzie's words from weeks and weeks ago slammed into the forefront of mind, from back when I'd first asked her about her nights. They don't work up here, they fall apart. Like a deep-sea fish brought up to the surface, they'll just plop. I was out of my chair so fast it skidded across the kitchen. Bioreactor waking back up, nerves screaming, yellow robes tangled around my legs. I used my tentacles to launch myself at the knight like an octopus shooting from a gap in the rocks, chasing shelled prey with a sharp beak, except I was trying to do the opposite, trying to keep his shell intact, and plunge him back into the deep waters. I slammed into him at the same moment I executed the equation. I didn't even care about the risk of getting stuck again. When I slammed into the knight and sent us crashing through the membrane back to outside, I barely felt the transition. The molten toxic corrosion of hyperdimensional mathematics sloshed inside my skull, searing through my eyeballs like hot pokers, but I simply didn't care. I executed the equation with a flicker of thought, pure reaction, no concern for how little energy I had left. Reality dissolved into kaleidoscopic chaos. For a moment, which was also eternity, we were nowhere at all. Then the quiet plane exploded around us with color and motion and time. The kinetic force of 5'0" me, with my clutch of tentacles and my trailing fan of yellow robe, finished the arc I'd begun back in reality, smashing into the front of the knight's shiny chrome armor, tentacles lashing like a panicked octopus. I was a tiny wrecking ball of fragile flesh and frantic fear, but he should have withstood that like a tank versus a particularly excitable hedgehog. To my endless horror, he fell over. He toppled like a felled tree, crashing onto his back on the soft yellow grass of the quiet plain. I went down with him, clinging on hard. My head banged off his breastplate, I bruised both elbows and one knee, crunched a hip into his armor, pinned one hand beneath his weight for a moment long enough to grind my bones, and somehow managed to punch myself in the stomach with one of my tentacles. It wasn't the worst post-slip landing I'd ever had, but it was up there. Not to mention I was already drained, exhausted, and emotionally spent after one of the longest nights of my life. Head whirling, body throbbing with new pain, truly empty, I felt myself just let go. But I didn't black out. I couldn't black out. My body wouldn't let me, it had decided otherwise. In the 1 second it had taken me and the night to fall down in a tangle of limbs and shaking metal, the miracle bioreactor in my abdomen had performed the opposite of an emergency scram operation. Every control rod shot out of its chemical channel, slamming the reactor to maximum output. I was running hot before I even finished injuring myself, screaming past safe limits and risking ego death. I sat up and fell off the night in a second tangle of limbs, turned to my head to vomit, and didn't even take the time to groan before I wiped my mouth on my sleeve. No time for self-pity. I turned back to the night because I had to do something, anything, whatever I could. No, 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 I hissed, going up on my knees and leaning over the night's supine form. I had no idea what to do with my shaking hands or quivering tentacles. I didn't even know where to start. The knight was literally falling apart, peeling himself out of his protective shell of imperishable metal, pushing away the chrome plates and shining pauldrons and letting go of the helmet and the greaves and the gauntlets, leaving them to lie limp and empty on the yellow grass as he revealed the gnarled truth inside, the real knight contained within the amour, the self of dark flesh. Watery red fluid sluiced out and soaked into the ground, stinking of blood and bile. But his tentacles, glorious things lined with powerful suckers and filaments like Velcro, had grown too weak for the task. He couldn't lift the heavy breastplate off himself, like a man trapped beneath a fallen beam with broken arms. I grabbed the metal with both hands and 2 tentacles and heaved it off his core. The heavy plate fell onto the grass with a dull thump. Oh God, I breathed. Oh no. Please, please. When one of the other knights had shown me the truth of what lay inside their armor, the protoplasmic bubbling, the masses of tentacles like ropes of muscle, the leathery dark raw beef texture of their skin, the experience had not only gifted me with empathy and understanding, it had given me a baseline for what they were supposed to look like. Which is why I understood the forest knight was so badly injured. His core, about the size of a beach ball, flopped as if partially deflated, like a balloon filled with cold, lumpy, congealed fat, spasming and flexing. The thickest and strongest of his dozens of tentacles lay limp and twitching where he'd managed to extract himself from the arms and legs of the armor. The smaller ones tried to rise, to drift like seaweed, but they merely quivered, falling back as if beached in the cold air. The surface of his tea-colored skin was puffy and bloated, like a bar of soap left in the water for too long. Every inch of him was weeping that thin, watery, stinking blood. The vigorous protoplasmic bubbling was absent. Half-formed mouths and eyes and other alien organs were frozen in the surface of his skin, as if he'd kept trying to generate the correct sensory apparatus right up until his energy had given out. 3 eyes seemed to still function, one like a goat's eye, the second an insect compound eye, and the third distressingly human. They all turned to meet my panicked gaze. You're okay now. My tongue was numb and a weight lay on my chest. You're outside. You're outside now, it's okay, it's going to be okay. My hands and tentacles hovered, useless. I had no idea where to start, how to help, what he needed. I dared not touch anything, lest I cause more damage, more pain. I'd practiced and practiced and practiced in order to do brain surgery on Badger, but the night wasn't even remotely human. What do I? I managed, throat closing up, tears running down my cheeks. Why didn't you say something? Why no, this is all my fault, it's all my fault. I should have paid attention. You weren't even supposed to be there. He shouldn't have been in our reality. Lozzie had told me in plain language. But I'd been so distracted, so focused on myself and Sevens and on getting home. I'd pulled him up behind us without even thinking. Like dredging a deep-sea fish to the surface on the back of my safe little submersible, like Lozzie but 1,000 times quicker, 1,000 times worse. His suit of armor, wrought from outsider star steel, had probably afforded him some limited protection. A bubble of metaphysical safety against what for him must have been a howling void. But even that armor had seams. He'd had to hold it together himself, from the inside. Imagine trying to clutch a space suit to your own naked body, when every movement might allow in more of the deathly cold nothingness beyond. I've hurt you, I tried to say, but it came out as a whine between gritted teeth. What do I do? What do you need? A mouth near his top end flapped open and shut with liquid noises, but held no expression and made no cry for help. I stared at it, feeling myself sinking. Not vocal, I said, voice dying. Not vocal. Of course I know you're not vocal. It's not your responsibility to be vocal. I should have asked, should have known. One of his 3 active eyes, the goat pupil one, blinked slowly in an unmistakable gesture. A thickly muscled tentacle bumped against my knee. I believe he was trying to say, it's okay. When I turned to vomit again, I could barely see through a veil of tears. It wasn't an aftershock of hyperdimensional mathematics that brought up the remains of my breakfast, it was guilt and horror. I'd done this. By accident. That didn't make it any better. I scrubbed my tears away and wiped my mouth again, desperate to help rather than be consumed by selfish guilt, but I couldn't do anything except be ready. There was no move to make here, no first aid, no medical help. Not without his maker. Lozzie. I said her name like a prayer, hoping beyond hope that she would materialize in front of me, just like she had that time in Wonderland. Lozzie. Lozzie, please. I looked up and around, pleading with her to appear. You made them, you know how to. When I raised my eyes, I discovered a ring of steel. Other knights had gathered to watch, to pay their respects to their dying comrade, or perhaps just to look on in horror at what I'd done. About 24 of them had wandered away from their habitual positions in Lozzie's imaginary round table, spread out across the soft yellow hillsides. They stood at a safe distance, silent grey-chrome sentinels of thick metal, carrying their shields and their swords and their lances, slung over their shoulders or held at rest. Their armor shone darkly, lit from far above by the strange purple whirls in the sky, framed by the distant horizon and brushed by the touch of the sweetly spiced wind. Help. I said. How do I help him? What do I do? None of them answered. They couldn't, that wasn't how they communicated. But that didn't stop me from twisting on the spot, looking at each blank-visored helmet in turn, pleading and babbling. Help, please, can't you do something for him? Tell me what to do. I can do magic, I can fix things, I can fix people, and then I don't know what to do. I need Lozzie, but she's not here. Perhaps it was my imagination, but I saw sorrow and resignation in the set of their shoulders, the angle of their chins, the slump of their arms. One of them was even pointing his featureless faceplate up at the sky, as if weeping to the absent stars. 2 of them had died protecting Lozzie and I, first from the eye, then from the black lighting creature in Carcosa. But had they ever witnessed the death of one of their own, up close and slow, with time enough to say goodbye? Regret almost overwhelmed me, filling my eyes and gritting my teeth. All that bioreactor energy rushed through my veins and saturated my cells, with nothing to do. This was why I cared. If Rain or Evelyn had been in mortal danger, that so-called hysterical strength would have made perfect sense. I loved my friends. I would do anything for them. But I'd known this night, this weird blob of flesh, for about 20 hours. I'd never exchanged a single word with him, we could barely communicate. But he'd been alongside me every step of the way. He'd volunteered to protect me, dueled Hastur, walked through the darkness, faced a sphinx, and helped me defy the King in Yellow. He was a hero, no matter how minor the part he played. All of them had volunteered for this, made some kind of vow with Lozzie, an unimaginable pact to protect me and help rescue Maisie. Though I had not asked for them, I had followers, disciples, pawns. Perhaps they were all prepared to throw themselves at the eye, when the time came. I did not particularly like that they had pledged themselves to die for me, but I knew I would use them in the end, if they were willing and able and could help me rescue my sister. So the only way to deal with that was to accept I had a responsibility to them in return. I had a duty of care. A covenant to never spend them carelessly or spend them not at all, if it could ever be avoided. To die defending us was one thing. But to die because I made a stupid mistake. A keening noise tried to force itself up my throat. I hadn't cried like this in months. I was filth. The dying forest knight bumped my knee with a tentacle again. Powerful suckers tried to grasp my jeans, but slipped off like broken fingers. A sob choked me as I reached down to make contact, as I touched tentacle to tentacle and the forest knight hung on as hard as he could. "It's going to be okay," I lied. Before I could think about what I was doing, I leaned forward and took the poor thing in my arms. I hugged the knight and gently pulled him off the ground and into my lap, stroking the puffy, leathery, weeping flesh like comforting a dying animal that didn't understand what was happening. But the knight understood all too well. He coiled several tentacles around me in return, but could barely hold on, all his strength gone. I made sure to wrap as much of him as I could in Seven's robes. Perhaps the warmth would soothe him, take away the pain. "It's going to be okay," I lied again. Television and movies always make these sorts of moments seem so clean and neat, white bed sheets and murmured goodbyes, eyes closing without the need for intervention, picturesque bullet wounds that never disfigure, sorrow-stricken heroes carrying their dead friends. But reality is so much flesh. They never show the voiding bowels, the ugly coughing, the bitterness and failure. The night was heavy enough that my thighs were already aching, a beach ball made of muscle, leathery flesh rough and sticky with the bloody weeping, which soaked into the front of my clothes and got all over my arms and hands. He stank of strange fluids, bloody excrement and bile, vaguely cloacal, and he was an awkward shape to hug without getting his watery blood on my neck and face. But I didn't care. I hugged him gently so as not to make the pain worse, pressing him against the radiating warmth of the bioreactor in my abdomen, now running almost out of control. My head felt light, spinning away into the clouds, senses beginning to blur. He was just like us. Lozzie had made him flesh, true flesh, and I was an idiot who hadn't paid attention to that simple fact. I swore I would never let this happen again. "It's going to be true flesh." Pressed against my abdomen. "Okay," I finished as my tears suddenly stopped. I looked down at the bee-tentacled beach ball of swollen, aching flesh nestled in my lap. 2 of his 3 eyes were half closed in exhaustion, but the one with the goat pupil swiveled to look up at me. "I know flesh," I murmured. "I'm flesh too." He blinked. "A question. I've already let 2 of you die and I should have been smarter, should have been faster, should have done something differently. Well, this time I can." My voice rose in confidence as I spoke, quivering but backed by resolution. "I have an idea." I brought one of my own tentacles in front of my face so I could watch the concept blossom into life. My beautiful pneumosomatic limb responded to my half-formed notion with a shudder of subdermal transformation, new organs and structures speed growing beneath the pale, rainbow-strobing skin, seeded by thought and fueled by the pounding energy of my bioreactor. The night's single remaining eye swiveled up to watch as the tip of the tentacle peeled open like a flower, revealing a needle. 6 inches long and wrought from biosteel, a substance I hadn't even known I could make until the idea had struck me. The needle was thick enough to pierce elephant hide. Purple light glinted off the metal. Tiny tendrils lapped it in a layer of antiseptic and then wicked away the moisture until it shone like a dagger. A trio of sacs nestled at the needle's base, each the size of a golf ball, semi-translucent, and rapidly filling with their respective payloads. One was golden yellow, bright and burning. The second was clear white, milky and thin. The third was black as the deep, oily and potent. My flank started to go cold, right where that tentacle was rooted and anchored in human flesh. I shoved the folds of Seven's cloak tighter against my side. Those 3 fluids were being distilled from my own blood, taken from my plasma and lymph, leached out of my cells. The bioreactor in my abdomen screamed with heat as it compensated, pumping out glucose and enzymes and other things best left unformed in the light of reality, substances which had no place in the human body, and I was seeing them with my own eyes for the first time. Somehow, deep in my gut, I knew I had only a second or two. The unnameable substances I was extracting from my own body would not stay stable when isolated and purified like this. I had to mix them again, join them with flesh, give them purpose. I raised the needle over the night in my arms and reared the tentacle back, ready to strike. His single eye found me, weeping a few slow tears. I didn't need to read minds to know the question he was asking. "You're going to be," I started to say. The needle ached like an open wound. Any longer and I must close it, void the contents, seal myself back up. But I couldn't do it, I couldn't give him hope, I couldn't lie. His strange goat pupil dilated with fear. "Will this work?" he asked. "I have no idea," I admitted and plunged the needle home. The metal spike struck true, stabbing right through his leathery hide and sinking into his core, among alien organs and exotic chemicals, the base slamming home against his skin. A set of tiny muscles contracted inside my tentacle tip, valves opening and sphincters pushing and tubes dilating, draining the trio of sacs and mixing their contents into a single stream of alchemical miracle that shot through the needle and into the night. It was one of the most disgusting physical sensations I'd ever experienced, like a cross between shoving one's leg into a vat of sun-baked cow viscera, and a highly localized chill of frostbite just under my ribs. A shock wave ran up through the tentacle I'd used and hit me in the flank like a bucket of ice cubes dumped into my torso cavity. I hissed through my teeth, then just hissed at the sky like an animal, in pain and shock. It stung and ached and made me want to tear out a fistful of my own flesh. In my abdomen, the trilobe bioreactor screamed and overheated, a burning star in my belly spinning new matter and dumping it into my bloodstream, to replace what I was giving away. He twitched and shivered in my arms, his single remaining eye going glassy and cloudy. I hugged him tighter, as if that would make any difference. Either this was going to work, or I'd just delivered a merciful death blow. I didn't even fully understand what I'd just done. Abyssal instinct and bodily drive were screaming at me to stop, like I was losing blood. The fluids I was ejecting were never supposed to leave my body, never meant to be chemically isolated in the first place, and absolutely not intended for transfusion into another living creature. But I squeezed with muscles I hadn't possessed 60 seconds earlier. Tiny membranes in my tentacle tip tore themselves apart. Miniature tendons snapped and curled. Muscles ripped under their own force, pushing out every last droplet of burning ichor. And suddenly, like touching a live electrical cable, I achieved connection. For a split second the night and I were part of the same pneumosomatic circuit. As the trio of chemicals recombined and pulsed through his circulatory system, as they bonded with his cell walls and located whatever he used instead of adenosine triphosphate, as they sank into the whirls of his thinking meat and rode the nerve impulses, his biology and mine were linked through the thin tunnel of biosteel, back up through my tentacle and into my body through my flank, all the way back to my heart and lungs and brain. I felt what he felt, all-encompassing pain and exhaustion, desperate hope, and a kind of love that no word exists for in any human language. I finally understood why Lozzie had made them knights. Real historical knights may have been a thin justification over the brutality of feudalism, but here was chivalric devotion worthy of the name. But there was not only one knight. There was this flesh and this mind, cradled in my arms on the cusp of death or salvation, but for one glorious explosive moment I was aware of all those other minds too, arranged in a ring for comradeship, company, and consensus-making. When one of them fell, the ring could close, so as to never truly be broken. I caught a snatched moment of their constant flow of thought exchange, not as words or any other recognizable communication, too alien for even me to understand, whirling impressions of sorrow, hissed arguments about intervention, debates on proper rights and procedures and mourning, wild shouts of trust and belief, while beneath it all they still carried on a million conversations about subjects so alien I never did manage to understand what I'd witnessed. It was as if I was a foreigner who had walked up to their round table, respected and beloved, but bereft of their tongue. Yet more distant than these alien yet human scale minds, I sensed other groupings of thoughts further out, still connected but totally incomprehensible to me, awash with sense impressions of vast barren plains beneath the purple-whorled sky, or the ruins of impossibly cyclopean cities built from sandy megaliths, or deep mountain caves full of strange fossils and ancient machinery. These were the minds of the barn-sized creatures Lozzie had called caterpillars, out there exploring the world of the quiet plain. If I stood at the round table, then those were akin to esoteric board games being played out in adjacent rooms, with terminology and move call-outs I couldn't begin to decipher. Lozzie had made life and imbued it with love and purpose, but now it was out there, beyond the boundaries of human imagination, exploring and learning in a place truly alien, making definition for itself. In that frozen moment, I realized I could never spend these beings against the eye. It would be a kind of genocide. Then my alchemical gift finished gushing from the needle. The connection broke and I was alone once again, shivering and hissing with pain, with a great big lump of bleeding flesh cradled in my lap. All three of the forest knight's eyes were closed. He was twitching, tentacles spasming, flesh roiling with sudden protoplasmic activity. Like a seizure. I withdrew the needle, wincing and retching at the awful sucking noise it made as it pulled back out of him, slick with blood. The tentacle I'd used felt tender and abused. I couldn't seem to close the petal structure again, so the needle hung there in the air, throbbing and aching. "Please, please," I hissed through my teeth. There was no great moment of relief, no rush of gratitude, no hysterical laughter, only a numb trickle of realization when I noticed the knight wasn't dying in my lap anymore. His leathery skin began to very slowly exude and consume strange organs again. 5 new eyes, none of them human or even animal, bubbled up from the surface, half-formed and cloudy, but they all looked at me, blinking with recognition. I eased him off my lap and onto the backplate of his armor, which still lay where he'd fallen. He tried to help, but his tentacles were still weak, slapping against pieces of discarded metal in a fruitless effort. "It's okay," I murmured, patting one of his tentacles. My head was whirling and pounding, my face flushed as if in the grip of a fever. "Rest. You don't have to rush to pull yourself together." 3 of 5 eyes swiveled back to me. 2 of them blinked. The third rolled back in its socket. With a soft pop of displaced air, a scuff of trainers on grass, and a flutter of pink, white and blue poncho, Lozzie materialized 8 feet to my left. "Heathy." She lit up, with her big smile and sleepy eyes. Lozzie looked no worse for wear than when she'd left me behind on this same spot the previous day. A little puffy around the eyes from lack of sleep perhaps, but practically glowing with bouncy energy. Her braid had come loose and fallen apart, wispy blonde hair loose about her elfin little face and mischievous eyes. A crudely constructed paper crown sat at a jaunty angle on her head, decorated with orange scribbles, and a face paint handprint of the same color was smeared across one of her cheeks and part of her neck, though the hand which had applied it had clearly not been human. Not enough fingers, too many claws. She'd also brought a passenger. Evelyn was holding on to Lozzie's forearm. Eyes going wide as saucers at our surroundings, mouth dropping open as her face drained of all color, other hand turning white-knuckle tight on her walking stick, Evelyn started screaming. What? Lozzie flinched away in confusion. Why did you bring me? Evelyn shouted in her face, trying to transition from terror to anger. She flung Lozzie's arm away from herself, gritting her teeth, unsteady as she took a stumbling step backward. But then she glanced over her shoulder and discovered nothing but more quiet hillsides of yellow grass and more silent nights around us. Because you said it was an emergency? Lozzie tilted her head and pointed at me and the forest night. And it is. You were right. Lozzie recoiled like a kicked dog. You took my hand, she chirped. To impress on you the importance of Evie. I yelped, staggering to my feet and reaching out for her with my tentacles. I was unsteady too, weak and covered in cold sweat like I'd just donated a pint of blood. Evie, it's okay, I'm here. This is a safe place. But Evelyn flinched away from my tentacles. She started to half-raise her walking stick, shaking all over, going green around the gills, her breath coming in struggling spurts. She couldn't stay focused on me, eyes whirling for possible threats, her weakened leg buckling with effort. If I struggled to exist outside, it must have been so much worse for Evelyn, unprepared for the trip, let alone the arrival. Safe, she managed to spit. You. I didn't wait for her to finish, I threw my tentacles wide, into a shark cage for Evelyn to shelter inside. She didn't like to be touched, so I doubted trying to calm her with a hug would help defeat the panic attack she was so clearly trying to stave off, but at least I could show her she was protected. Lozzie, I spoke over Evelyn's sudden splutter. Yes, it's an emergency. I pointed at the forest knight on the ground, still writhing gently amid the ruins of his armor. He came back to reality with me and I forgot what you told me. After an hour he started to. Oh. Lozzie's eyes went wide. She started at the knight. But he's okay. I brought my needle-tipped tentacle up between us. I injected him with the distilled stuff from my bioreactor. Heather, what the hell? Evelyn hissed. That seemed to have done the trick. She was still white as a sheet and looked like she wanted to vomit, but she wasn't rapidly falling apart anymore. Lozzie did a double take at the huge needle and back at me, then over at the knight. For a second she was paralyzed. My heart sank. I think it stabilized him, I said, but I don't know how to. It'll be all right. Lozzie launched herself toward the knight, poncho flapping as she went down on her knees by his side. Everything is going to be all right. All right, on the knight. Just wait. She waggled a hand at Evelyn and me as if to tell us to be quiet, then she started singing. Slow and soft at first, aimed down at the knight, like murmuring a lullaby to a small child. For a moment I was afraid that she had lied, that she was administering some kind of last rites, or saying a tearful goodbye. But then her voice rose in volume, mouth open in a long, haunting, beautiful note. She raised her eyes too, fixed on the horizon and then the skies, her face bathed in the purple light spilling from the starry deep above. Her eyes fluttered shut as she hit her stride. Lozzie's singing was beautiful but strange, one long note varying in pitch, broken only by the need to inhale, a sound that seemed too much for her throat, bobbing as she undulated up and down the scales. Below the pure sound of her voice itself lay another voice, a second tone on the very limit of human hearing, perhaps ultrasound, camouflaged and embraced by and hidden inside Lozzie's own singing. My eyes were watering, my ears itched, and a sympathetic resonance rung deep in my chest, as if the sound was reaching inside me. Evelyn had to wipe her watering eyes too, though neither of us was actually crying. It was like standing before a pressure differential, tugging on one's front with the deceptively gentle insistence of an undertow current. The knight at Lozzie's knees responded well though. He wrapped several tentacles around her thighs and waist. His protoplasmic shifting seemed to slow into a steady rhythm. Evelyn nudged me in the side with the handle of her walking stick and nodded sideways. I nodded back. We stepped away from Lozzie until we were clear of the invisible pressure from her singing. We had to pass among the gathered ring of knights who had come to watch, though several of them gladly moved to make room for us, stepping aside without a sound as their metal boots moved across the soft yellow grass. Evelyn flinched at that, despite my protective cage of tentacles around her. Even when we finally stopped and took a shared deep breath, her eyes followed the knights with all the wariness of a spooked cat. "It is safe here, I'm serious," I said, lowering my tentacles at last. "I don't even really need to do this." Evelyn shot me such a look, mustering her ire despite how she was still pale and waxy. "Heather. Really, I mean it. This dimension, it's empty apart from us and the knights, and they would literally die for me. You're safe right now, Evie. I promise." Evelyn wet her lips and leaned heavily on her walking stick, fixing me with a very unimpressed and grumpy look. That was more like it, that was more her. I'd given her an opening to do her usual thing, a familiar emotional handhold. "Heather, perhaps you've forgotten," she said. "But I happen to be a human being. I don't know exactly what you are anymore, and I don't mean that in a bad way," she added with a huff. "But you and Lozzie are far better equipped to be out here. I am not. And I'm right next to you," I said, waggling a tentacle. "See? Protecting." Evelyn eyed my tentacles again, wary and uncertain. Quite. A horrible slimy feeling slid into my chest and squeezed my heart. "Do my tentacles scare you? Do I scare you?" "What?" Evelyn scowled at me. "No, don't be absurd. Heather, I don't doubt your intentions. I doubt your capacity. We are outside and I don't care how supposedly empty and safe this particular patch of ground might be." She tapped the grass with the tip of her walking stick, then gestured around at the yellow hillsides, the dozens of knights, the sky full of purple whirls like diamonds scattered across velvet. "This is all a little overwhelming, to put it lightly. I don't even know what this place is. We could be breathing in anything. What is that smell?" She sniffed the cinnamon scent in the air. "Evie, if the eye itself opened above us, then my first priority would be to get you home safe." Evelyn shot me a sidelong look, still scowling and gritting her teeth, but she stopped ranting. "Do you want to hold my hand?" I asked, offering one. "In case of emergency, in case we have to leave quickly. I won't ask you to touch a tentacle." Evelyn huffed and rolled her eyes, but she slipped her hand into mine anyway, her maimed hand with the missing fingers, the same one I'd once felt slip out of my grip when she'd gotten stranded outside all by herself. It was clammy with cold sweat, muscles tight with tension. This time I held on tight. She looked away to watch Lozzie instead. I followed suit and we shared a moment of silence. "You're too kind for your own good, you know that," she said. "I think it's for everybody's good." Well. Lozzie is performing a miracle, isn't she? "All the king's horses and all the king's men," I quoted, watching with awe as the forest knight seemed to gain in strength with every minute Lozzie sang. Thick tentacles waved in the air. "Not an apt quote, Heather," Evelyn sighed. "Because it looks like Lozzie will indeed be able to put Humpty together again. Have you noticed she's got a hickey on her neck?" I sighed. From this angle, with Lozzie's face pointing up at the sky as she sang, it was impossible to miss. "Yes. How did she get that, outside?" Evelyn shrugged. She eyed my tentacles again. "I think your tentacles are very nice, Heather. They suit you. But please keep that one away from me." "What?" "Oh." I realized she was staring at the biosteel needle still hanging exposed in the air. It had been creeping closer to her without conscious intent on my part. I reeled it in, oddly embarrassed, and finally managed to fold up the tip of the tentacle once again, like a flower of flesh closing its petals. I felt the needle begin to dissolve back into the pneumosomatic cells. My bioreactor was still running hot, pumping out energy into my veins and animating my tentacles. Had the excess of power led me to seek an outlet? I forced the control rods back into their channels one by one, shaking and shuddering as I did so, feeling the exhaustion wash over me. My eyelids were like lead. Didn't help that I'd vomited up half my breakfast. Sorry, I lost track of it, I said. Though I'm pretty sure jabbing you with it would just make you hyperactive or something. Or give me cancer. Heather, you have no idea what that could do to a human body, one that lacks the self-regulating systems yours probably possesses by now. That's true, you do have a point. Again, sorry, really sorry, I didn't mean to. Do not use it on a person. Do not. Even in an emergency. Do anything else, brain math, experimental surgery, jamming your fingers into the wound. I understand. I was struggling not to blush. Do not. I get it, I grunted, then squeezed my eyes shut and rubbed the bridge of my nose. I'm sorry, Evie. I panicked and no, don't worry, I won't jab you with my magical life juice. I promise. Well. See that you don't. Awkward silence descended, broken only by Lozzie's singing. The forest knight looked like he was going to pull through, his skin wasn't weeping anymore and he had more than a dozen eyes, pointed in every direction. His tentacles were beginning to poke at the discarded pieces of his armor. This is fascinating, Evelyn murmured eventually. But Preen will be going spare. She trusts Lozzie. And she trusts me too, I hope. She knows we'll keep you safe. And we'll have you back in a minute or two, I need to know the knight is okay. I really messed up, Evie. I really did, I almost killed him. Evelyn looked at me no longer probing and wary, but just meeting my eyes. I don't know if I've ever seen you move that fast before. I'm sorry. When you realized something was wrong with him. Evelyn nodded at the knight, who was now attempting to slowly reassemble his armor around himself, worming bundles of tentacles through greaves and vambraces. He was still clumsy though, and couldn't quite get himself together. I have a responsibility, I muttered, only half talking to Evelyn. To everyone who helps me, to not be like not be. I waved a tentacle in front of my own face. Not be like what? Not turn into the thing that Evelyn had seen back in the kitchen, the awe-inspiring transhuman outsider that I feared I might become. Like Uranju. Evelyn squeezed my hand, a little too hard, almost panicked. When I looked up at her, she was frowning back at me, sober and serious. Don't drift away on me, she said. I laughed softly, not really amused. That's exactly what I'm trying not to do. You really feel that responsibility, don't you? Of course I do. He helped me, he volunteered when I was alone and lost. I know it was only one night, but I was terrified. I would have had to go to Carcosa, totally alone. I watched as the knight struggled to flex a metal boot at the end of a branch of ropey tentacles. Evelyn grunted. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then looked away before finally speaking. You feel that way about everyone in your life? Well, to some degree, of course. You don't have to give of yourself to everyone who asks. Or even everyone who doesn't ask. You have a right to say no. Evie. She didn't answer, staring at Lozzie singing away into the deep purple sky, squinting slightly as if puzzling over a complex problem. Her profile was framed by the distant hillsides, her small neat nose and her compact jawline, the bags under her eyes and her surprisingly squishy cheeks. Fingers of wind plucked at her hair, tugging loose strands across her shoulders. I could have left it there, pretended I didn't understand, feigned ignorance. But I was flush with the dregs of draining energy, with the emotional aftermath of narrowly avoiding the accidental death of a being in my care, and with the relief of conquering my lifelong fear of getting stuck outside. I was alive, so no more holding back. What are we talking about, Evie? I asked, and my voice only quivered a little. Her throat bobbed. Her maimed hand grew clammy in mine. Slowly, like the turning of an iceberg in deep waters, she looked back to me. Our eyes met but neither of us spoke. We both knew. That was all we needed. Then she huffed out a great sigh. Oh, not this. I don't mean this. She waved her walking stick at Lozzie and the night. This was right, you were right, you have a responsibility toward those who help you. We all do, it's basic solidarity. I admire you for it. It's the right thing. But everyone wants to bloody well sleep with you or worship you, she snapped, scowling at the knights gathered around us. That goes for you lot as well. Evie, I said gently. What? I'm right. You go off outside for a night and you come back with another girlfriend. I know there's reasons, good reasons, but you're jealous. I swallowed, hard. I'll always be just me. For better or worse, she huffed, rolling her shoulders to work out the kinks, watching Lozzie again so she didn't have to see my reaction to what she said next. I never had any normal friends. Obviously, I said, wary but wanting her to continue. Maybe she just needed to get it off her chest. I had and still have, yes Rain. Don't tell her I said that, she'll be insufferable about it. But she's hardly a normal friend. Evelyn sucked on her teeth in thought. When she spoke again, her voice came out soft and low. Don't repeat this to anybody, but sometimes when I'm alone in bed, I like to dream that I might give up on magic one day. She glanced at me, faintly guilty. After we rescue your sister. And we'll succeed. But I can't give it up, not even then. Not if I kill every mage within 100 miles of Sherrowford and we blind the eye with the universe's largest broken bottle. I gave a weak laugh, a polite laugh, but Evelyn wasn't joking. I know I can't, she carried on, looking out at the quiet plain again. Once you're in you can never get back out, but that's not why. It's not because of the knowledge that lives in my skull or the hunger for it, the only worthwhile thing I inherited from my mother. No. It's because of you, Heather. She went silent for a second. My heart climbed up my throat and knocked on the back of my teeth. Then she added, and Preem. Oh, I breathed. And yes, Rain too, obviously. But mostly you and Preem. You'll never get out, it's part of you now. And Preem is my daughter. Not sort of my daughter. She is. That's final. You're saying you have a responsibility too. No. No, it's not responsibility for me. If I didn't have this, Evelyn hissed through her teeth and corrected, I mean if I didn't have all of you, then I don't think I would have a reason to carry on. Evie. I squeezed her hand. She glanced at me and pulled a self-directed scowl. Oh, don't fret, she said. I'm not talking suicidal ideation. Heather, I was terrified when you didn't come home. I know, and I'm sorry, and I'm not looking for an apology. She looked away and cleared her throat. You can't force your way into my life and not take some responsibility. I managed a small laugh. You sound like me with Rain. I regretted those words before they left my mouth. Evelyn winced. I bit my tongue. I swear I heard a waver in Lozzie's singing. Perhaps it was my imagination, but I could have sworn one of the knights on a distant hillside put his faceplate in his palm. Sorry, I said, blushing. It's not quite the same, is it? It's not, I hurried to add. No. Not at all. Evelyn took a moment to compose herself. Heather, would you like to watch some cartoons with me? Sure. Of course, I'd be delighted to. You mean anime? Evelyn shrugged. Let's not get into that distinction right now. I'd like to show you some more favorites sometime. We don't do enough of that, we're always caught up in not dying or being eaten. So let's you and me watch some cartoons together. Just you and me. I'd like that. I squeezed her hand and she smiled, a real smile, which melted the tension from her face and for just a second made me see what Evelyn might have looked like if she'd never discovered magic at all. Puppy fat and kindness. I would have slipped a tentacle across her shoulders for a proper hug, but I thought it best to ask first, and I didn't quite have the courage for that. We waited through another minute of singing. Evie, I've been wondering, why didn't Sevens come after me just now? Oh, yes, that was a bit of a panic. She said you'd know what to do, but Rain was grabbing her and demanding she take us after you. Evelyn grumbled as she spoke, clearly unimpressed with the whole thing. Then Lozzie appeared about 60 seconds later. It was like an episode of Scooby-Doo, you out one door and her in the other. I half expected Preem to start humming yakety sax. Yakety what? I'm sorry. Never mind. But she didn't follow. She said it would be cheating, Evelyn explained. Then she ran off, vanished upstairs. My heart sank. That was a bad sign. Vanished as in vanished? No, physically ran off, with her feet. Though I think she took the stairs on all fours. We could hear her banging around up there. As soon as Lozzie appeared, Rain shouted at her to go help you, then she took off, to coax Sevens out from a cupboard with a box of dog treats for all I know. Oh dear, I sighed. But that did sound better than the alternative. More mess to solve. Before you go solving any messes, you need a sleep. A long one. And a bath. Evelyn performatively sniffed at me. You stink, you know. Well, pardon me for bleeding on myself, I said, mock apologetic. Evelyn snorted a laugh, shaking her head. Then she looked around at the nights, the yellow hillsides, and up at the purple world sky again. Maybe you're right. Maybe this particular place is safe. It feels like it right now, but I don't trust that feeling. Only a few more minutes, I think we're wrapping up, I said. The knight was finally wriggling tendrils back into his helmet, dozens of tentacles grasping pieces of armor and pulling them into place over his dark, leathery core, bracing them and fitting them together. I think he's going to be okay. At the rate he's going, it's going to be another 15 minutes before he gets himself sealed in. I glanced around too, at this strange and desolate place, now filled with Lozzie's progeny. I guess we can just come and go now, what with the dead hands gone. Evelyn hissed through her teeth. You mean you can come and go? Do not tempt me. Ah. Oh. Very fair point. Screw it, Evelyn grunted, nodding at the ground. Is it safe to sit on this grass? It's not going to poison me or something. I've lain down on it for hours before. Fair enough then. Give me a hand, will you? And so Evelyn and I settled down to wait for a few minutes, outside but not alone, never alone, as Lozzie put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I feel like something has changed. As if things are different now. I spoke the words to the ghostly reflection of my face in the bath water, warped by ripples in the surface. Silent heartbeats counted time against the peeling paint of the bathroom walls and the faded varnish on the door. The water's heat soaked into my tender skin and aching muscles like the penetrating embrace of an amniotic sac, reaching through my abdomen to cradle the embers in my bioreactor. My eyelids drooped shut for the 100th time. Yeah, plus one girlfriend, Rain said, bright and clear. I snapped back to full consciousness with a small hypnic jerk. Coming back from a night out with a bird on your arm, seems like a pretty big difference to me. Rain, I whined softly. That's not what I meant. Rain laughed, good-natured and teasing. She leaned out of her chair and over the side of the bathtub to ruffle my hair, a little difficult when it was hanging in wet rat tails down my neck and shoulders, so she ended up awkwardly patting me instead. She carefully avoided the nasty purple bruise on my forehead from where I'd head-butted the knight's armor. Whistle shifted on her lap, his little doggy paws preparing for a rough landing as he expected her to stand up, but Rain relaxed back into her chair and scratched Whistle behind the ears, in case he felt left out. I sank down into the bathwater, up to my cheekbones to hide a blush, then blew grumpy bubbles. "What do you think, Whistle?" Rain addressed the corgi curled comfortably in her lap. "Should I go easy on Heather while she's naked in the bath? While she's so slow and loopy-sloopy," she laughed at her own terrible joke. "Or should I press my advantage? What is your canine wisdom, oh small doggo?" Whistle replied with neither bark nor whine, but his ears pricked up and he looked from Rain to me. I surfaced just enough to free my mouth from the bondage of the deep. "Don't answer that, Whistle. She's not allowed to entrap you." Whistle wiggled his backside and rested his head on his paws, leaving us humans to work this out ourselves. "Good answer," Rain said appreciatively, scritching the top of his head. "Smart boy." I narrowed my eyes at Rain. "He's wise to your tricks." "I have tricks." Rain's smile was a touch too sharp at the edges. It didn't reach her eyes. "You know you have tricks," I sighed. "But also, no. I'm just being silly because I'm so exhausted. And I'm in the bath. It's kind of hard to have a serious conversation when you're naked and tired. Should I get in too, then?" I rolled my eyes, but a faint spark kindled in the base of my abdomen at the prospect of bath time with Rain, even when exhausted past the limits of my transhuman biology. I measured my words with care. Normally I'd never refuse, but we're not going to have any fun right now. If you hug me, I'll fall asleep, and I think that's the exact opposite of your stated purpose here, yes? Rain pulled a cheeky grin, that one did reach her eyes. Something in my chest nodded. "I'm not being serious, anyway," she said. "Not that I don't want to, you do need a good seeing to." "Rain." I tooted. "But you need food and sleep more than you need sex." Her grin hardened with a tone of command, which stirred a very different kind of squirming in my belly. "You're still following my orders, got it? You do what I tell you, until I'm satisfied you're out of the danger zone." "Yes ma'am," I said, not entirely serious. Being naked in the bath while Rain sat next to me fully clothed was a strange experience. She'd swapped her shorts for a pair of loose pajama bottoms, but she was still wearing a tank top, showing off her toned arms and well-shaped shoulders, not to mention the lack of a bra. Warm brown eyes watched me in return whenever I found myself lost in her looks, which was difficult to restrain when I was so exhausted, when it felt like I'd been gone for so long, despite the passing of only a single night. She was tired too, with dark rings around her eyes, but no flaw could conceal how painfully pretty she was, between her expressive mouth and full, fluffy, chestnut brown hair, which she kept running a hand through. "This feels like the first time I've been alone with you in a while," I said on impulse. "Ah, but we're not alone." Rain picked up one of Whistle's paws and waved it at me. He snuffed through his nose but otherwise tolerated the intrusion. "Whistle doesn't count." "Poor Whistle." Rain laughed. "Do you want us to be alone, Heather?" "No," I sighed. "It's okay, it just feels strange right now." "Was there no more news overnight?" I nodded at Whistle. "Badger didn't die in hospital or something?" "Nah, no news." "And you don't need to be thinking about news, you need to be resting. You were meant to be in class today, but I've already called in sick for you. So shut down that big smart brain of yours for a bit, okay? Let me take over for the rest of the day." "I suppose so. I can't just sit here though." "Time to get out then?" Rain asked. "You're looking pretty pruny." "Rain, that wasn't some throwaway platitude earlier," I said, frowning up at her over the lip of the bathtub. I shifted below the water, crossed my legs, and hugged my single remaining tentacle around my middle, as if to protect myself against a cold that had nothing to do with physical temperature. The pale, rainbow-strobing flesh blossomed with color against my sallow skin. "Something is different now." Rain opened her mouth to tell me off, to tell me to do as I was told, but she must have caught the stone in my eyes. "Wanna talk about it while I tell you off?" she asked instead. "It's not about you and it's not about sevens," I said. "Oh. Well then. That's good, because I'm still thinking," I finished for her. "I know. It's not about that. It's about outside. Outside is different now. At least home was still the same. Mostly. Myself, Evelyn, and Lozzie had returned from the quiet plain about an hour ago. Or perhaps 2 hours. I wasn't sure how long I'd spent in the bath. By the time I was coherent, my fingers and toes had gone wrinkly from the water. It was exceptionally difficult to keep track of time when I felt so groggy. I kept slipping away to flirt with the enticing dark mistress of sleep, seduced down into that other abyss, from which even I returned with only half-remembered glimpses. Which is an overwrought way of saying I kept nodding off in the tub. Rain had to sit in the bathroom and keep talking to help me stay awake. We'd left the forest night firmly behind in the quiet plain this time, at home alongside the rest of his society and species and hive mind. He'd taken about 20 minutes to fully reassemble his armor around himself, pulling each plate into position with several tentacles and settling it flush against the others. It took him several goes to get each piece just right. The seams of the armor were so finely wrought and locked together with such precision, as if cut by laser and expert hand. He would hold one piece against the next for 30 full seconds, moving it so slightly that we humans could see only the bunching and relaxing of his tentacles as he adjusted the metal by millimeters. But once a plate was locked to the others, he could hold it firm with nothing but the tensile strength of a suckered tentacle attached to the inside. I hadn't realized before how complex and advanced the Knight's outsider plate really was. When the volunteer from among them had opened up yesterday, in order to show me what they really were inside, I'd been so focused on the occupant that I hadn't paid attention to the container. The suits were a miracle of both metal smithing and engineering, and a further miracle how smoothly each plate moved once it was in place. They formed a perfect seal, with no oil, no cloth underlayer, no rubber to soften the plates against each other. And Lozzie had made them. She was many things, many of them delightful and lovely and creative, but she made life tenny, the Knights, who knew what else. She didn't know the first thing about metalworking. I made a mental note to ask Lozzie about the armor sometime. Perhaps she'd had help. Armor like that doesn't grow on trees. Or maybe it does, I had to remind myself. Things are different outside. Still, I wanted to know what kind of help was out there, outside, now that Alexander's ghost no longer blocked our way. After all, if things like the King in Yellow existed, that opened up all kinds of potential. Didn't it? And how much should I tell Lozzie about the dead hands, about Alexander's final torment? I pondered that question as we watched the Knight stand up. He'd gotten his boots and greaves together, along with most of the hip armor. For a long and comical moment he stood there as a tentacle-filled bottom half, while he picked up the first piece of the torso armor and lowered it into place. "Wrong trousers," Evelyn murmured, forcing a snort. Would Lozzie want to know that her brother had returned to life, if only as a short-lived imitation, a mask worn on an outsider's face? Would she want to know what had happened to the hands, his ghost, the last trace of his will? She hid her trauma so well behind her own mask, which made it difficult to know what would hurt her more. Regardless, I had a duty to tell her. She'd want to know all about sevens anyway. The Knight looked so much better as he sealed himself into his armor and settled the helmet on top, like a tank's hatch clanging shut. His dark and leathery skin was still puffy and bruised, but the beautiful alien magic of Lozzie's song had returned his strength and halted the blood weeping through his weakened skin. His protoplasmic shifting seemed to have settled as well. Eyes and mouths and a dozen other organs for which I did not have names sprouted across the surface of his skin, many of them rolling toward me. A long thin tentacle waved a thank you. I waved back. As he slotted the last pieces of his suit back into place, Lozzie reached inside the armor to give him a hug. Whatever flaws she had, none could accuse her of not loving her creations. Before we left, I hugged him too, through the armor. "This isn't goodbye or anything," I said. I can come and go freely now. So can Lozzie. Yeah. Lozzie said, slapping his abdominal armor with the flat of her hand. I'm going to come back and hear all about what they've been up to as well, and I need to talk to the caddies and check up on this one to make sure he's recovering okay, so we'll be back soon. Be good now. And thank you, I said to his midsection as I stepped back, speaking to where the true knight was, in the core of the armor. For everything you did. Lozzie tilted her head at me. Everything he did? It's a long story, Loz. Later, please. Oh. Lozzie lit up. Big emergency, not just night emergency. Evie already said some, yes. Quite, Evelyn grumbled, eyeing the re-armored knight. I'm not going to hug you, but thank you for protecting Heather. Now, can we? Evelyn paused in surprise when the knight nodded, a simple up and down tilt of his helmet. After a moment, she nodded back. Now, she tried again with a sigh. Can we please go home? Lozzie returned from the quiet plane under her own power, but Evelyn had to piggyback on my slip. She squeezed my hand so tight it hurt, but I refrained from comment. Lozzie had offered, profusely and with much enthusiasm, to employ her particular brand of dimension transfer to get us home, but Evelyn recalled the after effects of that all too well, from when we'd had to make our emergency exit from the library of Carcosa. Going out, Lozzie's way was smooth enough, but going back placed a terrible strain on the human mind and soul. So Evelyn had taken my hand, I'd covertly touched a tentacle to her shoulder just in case the worst should happen, and she'd screwed up her eyes for the trip. We made a far more gentle landing than my earlier membrane-ripping splashdown all the way from the Carcosa audience chamber, which was good because I hated the idea of Evelyn falling over and hurting herself. However, the very first thing I did was let go of Evelyn and sit down in a heap, head spinning, black oblivion filling the periphery of my vision. Even my tentacles were so exhausted they could barely hold me up. Evelyn was shouting for Preem, I was busy lying down for some quality floorboard time, but Lozzie took one step into the kitchen and spotted the knight's fallen weapon. Oh, he dropped his axe, she chirped. He'll need that. Preem appeared in response to Evelyn's call, clicking across the kitchen flagstones and stopping in the doorway to the workshop, though I could only see the corner of her skirt and her shiny black shoes. I could barely find the strength to raise my head. Preem. Evelyn sighed to conceal a quiver of emotion. That's better. Laws, came a familiar trilling. A bundle of whirling black shot across the sliver of kitchen visible behind Preem's feet, punctuated by a canine woof of mild alarm, which was in turn followed by scrabbling claws as Tenny gently placed Whistle on the floor so she could use every single tentacle to hug Lozzie. Tenny tens. Lozzie cheered. Whistle nosed around Preem's skirt and trotted over to me. Hello floor friend, I mumbled through numb lips. You are down low as well. World's funny from down here. Woof. Absent-minded, exhausted, and fading fast, I tried to use one of my tentacles to pat him, before realizing he couldn't see them. Poor thing flinched in surprise at the invisible touch. He gave me quite a look. Oopsie, I slurred. Evelyn frowned down at me. I believe Heather is going to need a hand. Preem, please. And where is Rain? Preem said nothing for several seconds. Tenny and Lozzie were squeal-hugging somewhere behind her. I think my eyes drifted shut, but then they were open again when she spoke. Evelyn, Preem said. Her sing-song voice broke Evelyn's name down into 3 distinct syllables, Evelyn, with the exact cadence of I love you. I thought I'd imagined it in my growing delirium. Yes. Yes, I'm back, thank you, hello, I love you too, Evelyn rattled off, then cleared her throat. Oh, I was. Right, I mumbled. Lozzie's head appeared around the kitchen door, encircled by black tentacles, wispy blonde hair floating all over the place. Be right back, she chirped then ducked back again, quickly followed by the sound of her straining to pick up the axe and failing gloriously. Lozzie may have been an ex-human with a godling riding in her head, but she still had noodle arms. Preem turned on her heel and stepped back into the kitchen. I couldn't see what happened, but I heard a very distinct clang and an oof from Lozzie. "Thank you, Preem," she said. "Dearie dear Preem." "Oh, don't tell me she's going back out there again." Evelyn hissed. "Can we not? Can we stop for 5 minutes, before Heather passes out? Before I start shouting?" "Should learn to axe first," Preem intoned from the kitchen. It was one of the few times I'd ever heard Preem put intentional stress on a word and she was not amused. Evelyn just stopped dead cold. Lozzie made a tiny sound of inquiry, but Preem kept going. "Axe before you take Evelyn." "Anywhere," she intoned. "Preem, really," Evelyn huffed. "Yes Miss Preem yes sorry yes," Lozzie chattered. "Axe first," Preem repeated. "Yes yes yes yes." I started laughing and couldn't stop, slow at first, bubbling up my throat and crinkling the corners of my eyes, until I was crying a little with the remains of the return high, the relief that I hadn't killed the night, the fact I was home. All of it overwhelmed me. I didn't recall much after that, not until I was in the bath. Reality blurred into an undifferentiated mess of bodily need and hands helping me along and my own tentacles grasping at any handhold they could find. I think I asked where Sevens was, but I couldn't be sure. At one point I was instinctively aware Lozzie was gone again, that she might not return. I wanted to stay right where I was and wait for her. Tenny waited with me, black tentacles entwined with mine in a cephalopod's hug. But then Lozzie was back again, a mote of light in the corner of my confused sensory input. I consented to be carried upstairs. I did recall passing Kimberly in the front room, wide-eyed and amazed we were all so busy so early in the morning. "Are we having a crisis?" "Miss I mean, Evelyn." "No," Evelyn grunted. "Carry on." "Morning, Kim." I slurred. Morning. I have to get to work, but did something happen?" "Could say that." Rain shot her a wink. "Tell you about it some other time." "I'd rather you not," Kimberly mumbled as she passed us on the way to make toast or cereal and do normal people morning things. Rain shooed everyone else out of the bathroom except for Whistle, and Tenny for the time it took her to give me a hug then cradled me on the floor and allowed me to nap in her arms while the bath filled with hot water. She peeled me out of my stained and dirty clothes, but when it came time to remove Seven's yellow robes, I felt guilty and confused. The robes had started life as a metaphysical presence before they gained heft and weight and solidity, but what did it mean to take them off? Would I be symbolically rejecting Sevens? I was half worried that the garment would melt away like dew before the morning sun, which is why I clung to them, whining a wordless complaint. "Heather, hey," Rain had purred. "Even married people take their rings off to shower. It'll be right here, on the side next to the sink. I promise." I acquiesced with a heavy heart and weak hands. Rain folded the robes. Seven's affection did not turn to mist, but stayed put, solid and real. Paradoxically, the bath revived me, even as it bolstered the caresses of sleep trying to drag me below the surface. My bioreactor eased down to a slow ebb and I folded away all but one tentacle. Maintaining all 6 felt right, but they were terribly unwieldy in the bathtub. Putting them away felt bad both physically and emotionally, but the hot water blunted the pain, and the abyssal dysphoria was soothed by the knowledge I could remake them whenever I wanted. Losing them temporarily no longer felt like such a terrible violation, because I knew they were a true part of me. My body was mine to command. I would need a lot more water in which to maneuver with all 6 tentacles, an idea I filed away for later in a mental folder labeled, "Maybe Too Good to Be True." The tentacle I did keep out was the one I'd used as the biosteel injection needle for the night. The tip still ached, as if dull and spent, so I soaked it in the hot water. The sounds of the house comforted my exhausted emotions, the familiar noises of Evelyn and Preem moving around downstairs, the woody, clean sense of the old bathroom, the murmur of Rain's voice as she kept me awake. A conspicuous gap lingered on the edge of my perception, like a missing back tooth that I couldn't locate with my tongue, not until Rain dumped water over my head to rinse away the shampoo. Jing still wasn't here. Somehow my abyssal instincts knew the shape of her absence, a black hole seen only by the lack of stars. Of sevens, I could sense nothing. "Oh, she's around here, don't you worry," Rain reassured me. "She's just gone all shy on me." Once I was coherent enough, I told Rain all about the night and what had happened. I unfolded my guilt and my fears, but then I kept going. "Different how?" Rain asked. The gentle teasing had vanished from her tone, replaced by quiet attention. Whistle's ears perked up too. I sighed and resisted the urge to sink back down into the bathwater. Perhaps I was more cephalopod than I thought, trying to take refuge in the watery deep. But oceanic darkness and water pressure could not keep uncomfortable thoughts at bay. Rain waited more than a few heartbeats as I tried to find the words to express myself. She didn't even crack a joke. "It's like exposure therapy," I said, then huffed and shook my head. "No, that's not right." "Forget I said anything." "Heather, I will do almost anything for you," said Rain. "I'll even kill people for you." "Hell, I already have. But if you tell me something in that tone of voice, I ain't gonna forget it." I nodded, feeling guilty at taking her for granted, then I rested my forehead against the side of the bathtub so I didn't have to look at anything except blank white. "Outside was always frightening," I said slowly, trying to warm to my subject. "That's a stupid statement, it's so obvious, but I have to say it. You've only been to the Library of Carcosa, Rain. It's dangerous, but at least it's comprehensible. Humans make libraries too. But most of the places I've seen out there aren't remotely human, nothing we would recognize, and when they are recognizable they're worse. I still scream at them even now, even places lousy can go make me." I had to take a deep breath. "Once, when I was a teenager, I slipped and ended up in this endless warren of metal corridors. It just went on and on and on. There was no purpose to it, like it had been built by a malfunctioning machine. Loops and circles which led nowhere, had no purpose, or no purpose I could ever comprehend without going mad. When I believed I had schizophrenia, I could write off those experiences as meaningless. Brain ghosts. Dreams. That was how I comforted and protected myself. All those endless vistas, those watching giants in impossible landscapes, those. I stopped to gather my thoughts, lost in horrible memories of places I didn't wish to revisit even when armed and armored in the glory of abyssal reflection, with all my tentacles and a layer of steel wrapped about my body. Naked in the bath, I turned my left forearm so I could look at the fractal. The first and best gift, the bulwark that hid me from the eye's sight and kept me beyond its reach. The shield that stopped it from dragging me back through the membrane over and over again. "Thank you, Rain," I murmured. "You're welcome," she said. "Hey, I haven't done anything right now except sit here and look pretty." "But you're welcome, that comes naturally." I managed a small laugh. "Yes, keep doing that, please. Don't let me interrupt though." "Yes. Right. Where was I? It's alien out there, yes, but at the court of the king in yellow, they were thinking beings. People, sort of. They were only pretending to be human, but they were people. We could communicate. There are people out there. Sort of. I never thought of it that way before. You gonna go visit for a cup of tea?" "Absolutely not." I paused. "Well. Maybe." "Hey, I was only joking," Rain laughed. "But if that's what you need to do." She trailed off, which was not normal with her. I finally looked up from the bathtub and found her eyes, unsmiling but gentle as she gazed back at me. That was uncommon as well. "I mean, think about it," I said, almost pleading but not certain why. "Think about the eye, about Wonderland, about the world the eye is floating over. Wonderland has buildings. There's shells, yes, burnt out by some unimaginable world-consuming flame, but somebody or something built those things. People. I'd never really thought about any of this before. Preem and Zheng are one thing, they came from the abyss and humans gave them bodies, that makes sense. I remember what it's like down there, anything living there would much rather be here, with warmth and sunlight and strawberries. But outside? It doesn't make any sense, some of those places are so alien, so weird, I can't even imagine how they think. There's, what? Whole civilizations out there. I shrugged, lost. Lozzie came home with a hickey. From where? Whoa, Heather, easy, Rain murmured, leaning over to squeeze my naked shoulder. Slow down, hey. I don't have time to slow down, I grunted, strange tears prickling in my eyes. Maisie can't wait. Rain's eyebrows shot up. You think this can help Maisie? I was thinking about it while Evelyn and I were watching. The night, I said, trying to unpack thoughts which had gathered while in the grip of exhaustion, half-dreams that held gleaming diamond specks of insight buried deep in the sucking mud. About outside, about thinking beings, species, races, civilizations, I don't know. That's what the nights are, a species. Rain, why did the eye manifest where it did? Over Wonderland? What did they do to let it in, whoever they were? Rain tilted her head. Does it matter to us? She asked the question plain, not a challenge but a serious inquiry. I loved it when she did that. I nodded. I don't know how to beat the eye or how to take Maisie back. I don't even know where to start. Sevens told me that lesbian romance has something to do with it, but I think she's a little biased about problem solving. I don't see how my relationships help me fight or communicate with the eye. If we get the book from Edward and Evie makes her invisibility thingy, okay, then we can get to Wonderland, but then what? You're suggesting we root around in the ashes out there? Exactly, I whispered. Rain nodded slowly and kissed me on the forehead. I let my eyes flutter shut for a second before she sat back again. Experimental archaeology, Rain said. You sure have been thinking a lot. Oh, I don't know, I sighed. I don't even know what I expect to find. There's a whole world beneath the eye. I'm trying to avoid a frightening thing, Rain. Ah. If I can go outside casually, easily, am I just doing what the eye wants me to do? Am I becoming more like it? I shook my head. But I have to try. I have to. Lozzie made miracles out there. Maybe I can too. Hey, you make miracles just fine here, Rain said. Her smile beamed through me. Thank you. It's hard to remember it's only been a single night. And now I can just come and go. From here and outside. That's so strange, so different. I can't put it into words, Rain. I can't grasp that concept. The realm of my nightmares is somewhere else I can step into, just like that. A shiver passed up my body, the physical memory of post-traumatic stress. Outside was still horrible, even if only a thought away. Rain must have seen, because she reached over to turn the bath tap. She dumped another couple of pints of hot water in with me. I felt the wave of diluted heat against my side, easing away the imaginary chill. I was afraid you might not come back. Rain spoke low and soft. Her voice cracked. Rain. I was so shocked I started to stand up in the bath. My single tentacle uncoiled from around myself and reached out toward her. Whistle looked up from her lap, making an inquisitive murmur in his throat. Hey, I'm fine now, Rain said, waving me down. She sniffed loudly and wiped her eyes on the back of her hand, then blinked in surprise at the moisture she found there. Oh, hey, tears. Wow. Rain, it is okay to cry, I blurted out. It's okay, it's fine. Sure is, she agreed, cracking an awkward smile, words thick in her throat, red eyes blinking at me. You wanted me real and raw, you got it. I don't want to lose you out there. And that's not Miss Knight-Errant talking, that's me, Rain. Just me. I reached out with my actual hand, so Rain could see. She gave it a squeeze and I squeezed back. I won't leave you, I said. Even if I wanted to go outside, which I don't, I'll always come home. I know, Rain sighed. Just feels like you had to go through an ordeal without me. Ha, some bodyguard I am. It's not your fault. I should have brought you along, even. I laughed, but inside I cringed with private horror. I would not have survived the trials of last night without pneumosomatic mimicry of the abyssal body I'd once possessed, without my tentacles and my bioreactor, my armor and my immune system, my hyperdimensional mathematics and my status as the Eye's adopted daughter. Rain was strong, smart and charismatic. I love her, but she is only human. What if she'd inhaled a lungful of Hastur's yellow spores? Or had her elbow caught in a million jaws of the gnawing darkness? Or been swatted aside by melancholy's paw, or caught up in the party of flesh and madness that raced through the corridors in the palace of the Yellow King? What if she'd been in the audience chamber and required distracting like the others? What if she'd been under threat when the king's favorites had donned their lover masks? How would I have reacted to Rain being threatened? Rain outside and unprotected. However much tender regard I felt for Sevens, I did not love her. Not yet. But I had defied the Yellow King for her sake. What would I have done if Rain had been there, if he had threatened her? Regicidal revolution, I whispered, so softly that Rain didn't catch it above her own gentle laugh. I never did get to punch Alexander's stupid face in, she was saying. Maybe the king in yellow would have obliged a request. What do you think, would he be a good sport about that? Maybe, I said, but I didn't really mean it. My mind was elsewhere. I wasn't sure I could ever take Rain outside. She noticed my internal struggle. Hey, Heather, it's gonna be alright, she purred. We'll be alright. You and me, whatever else happens. I'm just getting used to the idea. Processing, you know. I'm not sure if I should say this, but in a way those freaky dead hands had a silver lining. I didn't have to worry that you might step out and never come back. And I'm sorry for thinking that. I really mean it. I apologize. A lump formed in my throat, sympathetic guilt. You still don't have to worry about that. I know. I trust you. Her words radiated that beaming confidence that had first won me over, battered down my walls, and saved me from a future of antipsychotic medications in a padded cell. But I saw the cracks beneath, the weather-worried flaws. In the past I would never have possessed the courage to press. But? I asked. The Rain of a month ago would have laughed off the question and pretended nothing was wrong. But my Rain sighed through a smile. But you had a hell of an adventure out there, she said. You already made miracles, by the sound of it. I would have loved to have been there, just to see you being cool. My squid girl from beyond. She broke into a grin at that, genuine and undiluted. But I wasn't there. And maybe I won't be next time, either. I will always come home, I repeated. And I'll always be here. I love you, I said, trying not to tear up. Rain nodded and reached over to ruffle my hair again and kiss me on the cheek. I hugged her over the side of the bath, leaving damp patches around her shoulders. When we separated again, her eyes went up and to my left. I followed her gaze and realized she was looking at my tentacle. You can see it? I asked. But you're not wearing the glasses. How? It's wet, Rain said. Oh. I can't really see it, not the flesh or the cool ARRGB lighting. Sorry. I blinked. But I can see the sheen of water hovering in the air. That's some real Invisible Man stuff you got going on there, Heather. Better be careful in the rain and such, right? Don't want to freak out random people. Of course, I never thought of that before. How odd. I chewed my lip as we both settled back again, moving my tentacle through the air and dipping it back into the bath. Whistle snuffed in Rain's lap. His eyes followed the dripping wet ghost of my single tentacle. "You want to get out yet?" or Rain started. "It's the same for me," I said before I could lose all my courage. "With Lozzie." Rain raised her eyebrows. "About going outside, the fear of letting somebody go and that they might not come back." I explained in a rush, desperate to get it out of me, reject it, expel it. But I couldn't deny it. "Now the hands are gone, I've given up control." "You had control." I shook my head. "I wasn't the one stopping her from going outside, but I wanted it." I swallowed, the words like venom in my mouth as I spat them out, but I had to speak them. "I'm always afraid she'll leave, go outside and not come back, because that's where she belongs, that's where she's most comfortable." Part of me saw the hands as an excuse, or used them as an excuse to keep her here. I blinked hard, frowning at myself. And that's a terrible thing. The potential is in me, to be terrible. To want to control. Admitting it is good. Saying it out loud, that's good. I shrugged. I don't feel any cleaner for saying it. "Are you still going to try to stop her from going outside?" "No. No, I don't have any right to do that." "Of course I don't." "Is this a me thing, Rain? Or is it a mage thing? Or because of what I'm becoming, because of—" I trailed off as I arced my one tentacle through the air again, coiling it closed into a fist of pale meat. Rain couldn't see the flesh itself, but she could still see the faint sheen of dripping water. Her eyes followed it too. "I don't know what I'm turning into," I murmured. "It feels good, but—" "That has nothing to do with it," Rain said, firm and certain. I blinked at her. "How can you be so sure?" Rain sighed through a slow grin and spread her arms in a shrug, then returned one hand to scratch behind Whistle's ears when he whined. "Sometimes you forget I'm a student of politics, don't you? And I don't just mean 'cause I'm studying it." I shook my head, confused. "What does that have to do with all this?" "And I never forget. I never forget anything about you, Rain." "It's not a you thing," she said. "I know you too well. It's not a mage thing, not specifically, and I don't think it's an abyss thing either. It's a power thing." "Power? Oh." Rain leaned back in her chair, rolling her neck and getting comfortable. "There's this idea, you've probably heard it before, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts." "Absolutely. Right, yes. Of course, you think I'm. But that's bullshit. Power itself doesn't corrupt, that's just an excuse used by monsters. If you have a consistent and coherent ideological standpoint, and you apply it to the world around you, then hey, power doesn't corrupt. Not by itself. The standpoint has to be wrong in the first place." I frowned in thought. "I'm not sure I agree with that." "Then do some dialectics." "Excuse me?" I boggled at her, feeling like a Yorkshire Terrier presented with advanced algebra. Rain laughed. "Look, Heather, you wanted to keep Lozzie here, you wanted to control her, but you didn't. You struggled with the feelings and you worked them out, and then you did the right thing. Nobody gets difficult questions right first time, nobody knows what to do on pure instinct. I sure never have. The guidance of conscience is a load of bullshit. You have to actually analyze. And by your own reckoning, that's what you did." Rain laughed, serious debate time over. "Far as I know, she went off for a nap while I was running your bath. But don't worry, I don't think even she is gonna pry sevens out of hiding." I managed a tiny laugh as well, using it to cover for the question that floated up into my mind. The bathwater was getting cold again and my fingers had gone very wrinkly. I wiggled them in the air. A lump was hardening in my throat. To not ask the obvious question would be very conspicuous. But I just said, "I suppose it's time I got out. I could use a nap as well." "You sure could. Come here then. Rain put Whistle down on the floor, then got up, grabbed a towel from the rail, and held it out for me. I clambered over the side of the tub on shaky legs, muscles soft and sleepy from the heat and relaxation. She wrapped me in the towel and set about drying my hair while Whistle nosed along the skirting boards for interesting smells. I closed my eyes as Rain rubbed my hair with the towel. Did you? Rain made an innocent sound, as if she didn't know. I sighed heavily and screwed up my courage. I'd faced down an outsider god only a few hours ago. Why was this so hard? Did you have any luck finding sevens? I forced out. A little bit, Rain answered, casual, or fake casual, I couldn't tell. My heart rate spiked as her hands stopped, leaving me beneath the dark of the towel over my head. She hid under our bed, then in the cupboard. Like I said, hiding good. Scurries about right fast. Good at slipping through gaps and out of hands, too, like a ferret or a weasel. Made of rubber and grease. You weren't rough with her, were you? Nah, course not. Just want her to come out and talk. Rain clucked her tongue. Besides, she should have been in this bath with you, her hair's filthy and she does smell a bit, though not of sweat. Got an iron tang to her. Vampire smell, I guess. Rain, I whined softly. I'm not going to share a bath with her. I don't need to do things like. Rain whipped the towel down off my head without warning. A soft yelp escaped my throat, chased by a hiccup that made poor Whistle jump. Rain shoved her lips against mine, hard and fierce, gripping my body through the towel wrapped about me. The deep kiss left me flushed and panting when she pulled back, eyes burning through mine. I hiccuped again, ruining the moment. Were we about to do it on the bathroom floor? Oh, I swallowed, discovering that I'd lashed my tentacle around one of her arms. I let go, gently, but Rain pinned the arm against her body, trapping my tentacle. Nah, she said. No running. Are you marking your territory? I managed to ask. Yes, she said. Straight up, not gonna lie about it. Now, if 7 Shades of Sucking Shit wants to join us, she's more than welcome. We can talk. I'm not even fronting or anything, I am being honest about my feelings, wide open. Her shit makes me uncomfortable and she needs to come talk to me about it. I don't think she's listening in anymore, not like she used to. She's a participant now. Rain's eyes found mine again, burning bright with passion, and I half wished I hadn't gotten her attention. I quivered and wanted to take a step back, as if she was about to slam me into the wall and take me right there. But saving you doesn't mean she gets to sleep with you, in any form, Rain said. And she sure as hell isn't marrying you first. I have a claim on you, Heather. You're mine. I swallowed, flushing bright red. That's very. A grin broke across Rain's face like the sun from behind storm clouds. She leaned back and straightened up, gave me space to breathe, her engine clocking all the way back down to mild and easy. She ran a hand through her hair and sighed. Unhealthy? Yeah, probably, but hey, you wanted the real me. I was going to say romantic, but maybe it's unhealthy of me to think that way. I took a very deep breath and tried to force my heart rate down. Do you want to get married? Heart rate back up. Way up. I stared, wide-eyed, a balloon expanding inside my chest. Rain leaned one hand against the wall next to my head, slow and gentle. Not yet, she added. Rain, my mouth had gone completely dry. My tentacle was still around her arm. I couldn't let go. I don't know if either of us will even be alive in 6 months. 4 months. She cracked a cheesy smile. All the more reason. No, I'm serious. Rain. You can't say that and not treat it seriously. I don't like to think about it, but all of us, we might not survive trying to rescue my sister. Even with everything I've learnt, all the ways I've changed, I might die. And I can just about deal with that. I swallowed hard, to hold back the sudden threatening tears. But you might God, I hope you don't. Even if I don't make it, I want you to live, Rain, Heather, Rain said my name and suddenly she was all serious, even through the smile. She didn't lean in close, but it felt like she did. If the worst happens, if that happens, if the rest of us all make it back but you don't, then I'll never be able to marry you. I felt like my heart was going to explode. My head span. We've only known each other 7, 8 months. My words emerged in an absurd squeak, followed by a hiccup. What do I tell my parents? Rain shrugged. So. Doesn't have to be a big deal. No ceremony, just registry office. Evie and Preem can witness for us. Dunno what they'll think of Preem though. Does she even have a signature to sign? Oh, Evie, I thought. You're serious, I said out loud. I love you. And I love you too, Rain, but I might not come back from Wonderland. I might lose. And I swept you off your feet knowing that. I fidgeted in place, as if pinned to the wall like a captured moth. I glanced at Whistle for help, but he didn't even understand, trying to go up on his hind legs so he could peer into the toilet bowl. Oh, screw it, I hissed. I was never going to make it to 30 anyway. I shot a dark look at Rain. This is very unfair, I'm exhausted. And I thought you didn't believe in marriage. Why bring the state into this? She shrugged again. We could do it our way instead, if you like. What do you mean? We don't even have to go to the registry office. We can do it right here, right now. Cut our palms and press them together, the way Zhang and I never did to seal our deal. Mix our blood, you and me, forever. You can even jab me with your magical life juice that Evie was telling you never to use. I want to see what you feel like inside me. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to concentrate past the blush supernova in my face. Rain, yes, in principle, but... Rain finally straightened up again, laughing. It's cool, Heather, no pressure. Couldn't let myself get upstaged by Mellow Yellow. She beat me to the proposal, but she won't beat me to anything else. I boggled at her, coming down from a high I hadn't wanted. You mean that was all? Oh, no. Rain shook her head. I'm deadly serious. Just, you can wait. If you want. I scowled at her, unimpressed but also secretly delighted, unwrapping my tentacle from her arm and clutching my towel to my front. Did you just propose to me while I'm naked in a towel? She cracked a grin and shot me a wink. Sure did. I huffed and straightened up, but half of it was performance. Hey, for serious though, Rain said. I am jealous. For real. Sevens wants to join us, be my friend, be your more than a friend. Fine. But she's not going to scuttle around and avoid me and then slink into bed beside you at night. No way. We do this up front. I frowned at her, then at my tentacle tip. And you're not bothered by the fact she's an outsider? Not even remotely human? Rain shrugged. I've got no problems with what Sevens is, as long as she's not a side piece. She's in or out, not halfway. Fair enough, I sighed, struggling to get my breath back. Rain took me gently by the arm, supporting me. Got a bit carried away there, she said. No, it's very understandable, I don't understand why she's hiding. I sighed. And thank you for being honest, thank you for everything. Oh, Rain, what's she going to think of all this? Dunno. Wish she'd hurry up and come home though, she's missed all the fun. Rain took me gently by the shoulders and carried on drying me off. Hey, she might be back after you sleep. We can talk more then, too. You just focus on that. Want me to carry you to bed? I shot her a look. I'd rather you get me some clothes, please. However much I would love you to princess carry me to bed, I think I'd expire if Evelyn saw that in the corridor. Rain laughed and nodded. She let me go, stepping back toward the door. What are you going to do while I nap? I asked her, with a sudden fishhook in the back of my throat. Rain paused, as if considering lying by omission, then she shrugged. Gonna try again with Sevens. Think she's in the laundry cupboard. I took this off your bedside table, here. She pulled a piece of yellow fabric out of her pocket, a jagged torn edge from some larger garment. Remember this, she said. This was all me, all my knife. I want to give it back to her. Symbolic gesture, too. Rain never got to finish her sentence. All at once the bathroom door crashed open, as if a large and overexcited dog had run headfirst into the wood. A familiar bunch of black tentacles shot inside and grabbed the door frame. Only that familiarity kept my yelp of surprise from turning into a scream. Whistle yipped and turned in a circle. Heath Heath. Tenny stood in the doorway looking extraordinarily proud of herself, fluffy antenna wiggling, tentacles going all over the place, hands flapping. One group of tentacles had Sevens by the scruff of her neck. The scrawny, bony, awkward girl looked like she'd been crouched on the other side of the door when Tenny had grabbed her. She hadn't even had time to start hissing and gurgling, let alone kicking and biting. Needle teeth exposed, red eyes dilated wide, she hung there in shock, hands up as if they'd been pressed against the door, head turned slightly. The very picture of a scuttling goblin. Evie's dropping. Drop. Drop. Tenny exclaimed in flustered delight, shoving Sevens into the room. Eavesdropping, I corrected her gently, catching on instantly. Thank you, Tenny. Thank you, but please be gentle. Please. I am gentle, Tenny said with a smile. She gently encouraged Sevens further into the room. Pounce gentle. Catch gentle. No bruises. Sevens let out a "rr" noise in the back of her throat, looking very grumpy and scowling up at us, then round at Tenny, and even baring her teeth at Whistle, who backed up and let out a little huff. Ah, Rain said, a teasing smile on her face. Listening in, eh? Still trying to play like you're off stage? Eavesdropping, I sighed. I only wanted to know. Sevens rasped. I'm sorry. Well, you're here now, Rain said to her. No time like the present. What do you think, Heather, what's the punishment for eavesdropping around here? Bath time? I ventured. Sevens' eyes went wider. No. Vampires allergic to running water? Rain asked. Sensory processing issues with liquids? Don't like being submerged? Anything else? No, not that, but... Then you are having a bath. Or a shower. Or roll in some sand, just get this mask clean, Rain said. Then you can cuddle with Heather, when you're clean. Not before. Sevens bared her teeth and gurgled. Behind her, Tenny let out a trilling sound. Sevens flinched and stared at her. Or, Rain said, you can stay greasy and unwashed, and you and I can have a chat about relationships without Heather, because she'll be napping. Blurg, went Sevens, sticking her tongue out and dipping her head. Bath time.